Welcome to another edition of the RF Video Shoot interview series. Today we're joined by a true living legend, the only living legend, Larry Zbyszko. Thanks for being here today.
Well, you're welcome.
My very first question to you, Larry, would be, what did you do before professional wrestling? Were you a big fan of it growing up?
I was a big fan. I was, one of these kids that was kind of raised in the early days of television. Actually, this kind of story's in my book.
Right.
It's going to be really cool. But, when I was raised as a kid, it was the thing that, to be the good guy, to be the hero. You grew up to Supermans and Batmans. And everything was nice, the Lone Ranger and all that stuff. So when I was maybe 12, 13 years old, we moved to Pittsburgh. Family picked up in Chicago and moved out to Pittsburgh. And that was the first time I saw wrestling on television. Studio wrestling out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I'm sitting there, a little kid, and I was watching it, and this one guy stuck out, and there he was, Bruno. I mean, it looked like a gorilla. And it just got in my blood. And when I was 13 years old, after watching wrestling a little bit, I became such a fan that was what I wanted to be. I remember walking into my guidance counselor like the first year of high school in 9th grade, and the counselor says, well, what do you want to be? And I said, I'm going to be a professional wrestler. And you can see this guy go like, I don't believe they had a curriculum for that. And he had no idea what to say. So he kept trying to make excuses like, well, those guys are really, like big. You sure you want to be it? Because I was like a little skinny, pimply-faced kid, like most other kids at 13. But that was my life's quest. I saw it on TV at 13, made up my mind to do it. And then I started wrestling actually back in Pennsylvania. It was one of the few states that offered it, in a junior program. I think I started in 8th grade back in like 1964 or something. So I just started wrestling there and wrestled in high school. And the story goes on, but that was it. I was a mark.
Who did you meet in the business as far as like someone that took you under the wing, and how did you actually get into the business?
Well, it was kind of a destiny thing. It was Bruno became my hero, and big fan. And then one day I went to church. The family drags us all off to church, and I'm sitting there in the pew, and I look over down the pew, and who's a few people down there? There's my dad and my mom, and there's Bruno sitting in the pew at church. So everybody went up and went to, not confession, the other one, communion. And I didn't go. I sat there because I wanted to slide down and sit next to Bruno. So I remember the rest of the Mass, I'm sitting there right next to Bruno, and I was like in heaven. I'm looking at him, and his wrist, it was like, sitting next to, Godzilla there. I'm in awe. So, afterwards, the service lets out, and down I go, and I'm waiting outside the steps, and here comes Bruno. So I hit him up for an autograph, and I still have this at home. I might put a picture of it in my book. But it's got the old St. Anne's or St. Sebastian's like Sunday bulletin with the date on it, with Bruno's signature, Tulare on it. And as he was signed it and was trying to, run away, and I remember yelling really loud because we laughed about it years later. I was yelling in front of all the church people, "Good luck against the beast!" So he was wrestling at the time, and he cringed and kept on going. But then it was just weird. Some years after that, my mom wound up working at that same little school. So that's where David went to school, Bruno's kid. And I found out through my mother where Bruno lived. And basically, it's another part of the long story. But after I found out where Bruno lived, that's a whole other story there.
All right. You can go into it if you want.
But, to make a long story short, I basically, got a little older, got 16, started driving the car, and every time I went somewhere, I drove past Bruno's house.
So you were stalking him?
I was a stalker. Right. So one day in his backyard, I look through the hedges, and who do I see sitting in the backyard is Bruno. He's playing with David, who was a little kid at that time. So I parked the car, and I come crawling through his hedges, and I'm coming through his hedges, and he looks at me, and he gets up, and I'm like, wow, and I just introduced myself. And for some reason, again, it just must have been, meant to be, I was very respectful, and we hit it off. And for months after that, every time I saw him in his backyard, I'd stop in and say hi. It got to become a thing.
Right.
And then I got a little older. We started working out together. But basically, he was the only guy I met in the business.
Oh, wow.
And he lived a couple miles down the street from me, and that's how I had access to him, because I just busted into his yard.
Huh.
But he was the man at the time who was the only man to know. Back then, there wasn't wrestling schools. They didn't want you in the business. And Bruno was such a star that it was the politics. When Bruno, brought me in, everyone was nice to me. The Strongbows, the Monsoons, even the McMahons sometimes, and the Savoldis, and everybody, because being nice to me was showing respect for Bruno. So it kind of helped my career immensely. It was just the politics of it.
What was the training like for you as far as how you got in the business? You told Bruno you wanted to be a wrestler, and he pretty much took you under his wing.
Well, he took me under his wing, and actually training with Bruno wasn't so much wrestling. There was a couple of things. Bruno wasn't much of a wrestler. He wasn't like Carl Gotch. But he was just so damn strong, and he knew some simple things, front face locks and arm locks and wrist locks and some arm bars. But what I did with Bruno was a fanatic on training. And we'd go down to his basement. He had a little gym set up in his basement. And I mean a little gym. I mean, he just had a bench with a big Olympic bar and a bunch of weights and one incline bench. And that was it, in one little room in his basement. And we'd work out there for about 3 hours every other day. And I basically did the same workout he did, which was like an hour and a half just on chest. And, Bruno's, his chest was massive, and he had that look. And I kind of developed kind of a similar look to Bruno because I did the same workout. So the protege thing kind of clicked right in. But I remember we were doing an hour and a half just on chest. We'd start off with benches, maybe a few reps real light, and then gradually increase and gradually decrease the number of reps. And it was about maybe a good couple of years in his basement of me and him working out together when I was still finishing up school and wrestling amateur. But I went basically from nothing to, in 2 years after working out with Bruno, I was benching 465.5 pounds. That was my best bench. And at that time I weighed 235. And years before the steroids and all that stuff came out. And Bruno at this time, I was maybe 20, 21-ish, and Bruno was already maybe around 40-ish. And the most I ever did was 465. Bruno was still doing 505 at that time. Mm-hmm. And then after we did our maximum, we had a contest. He was big on contests. So we had a contest, who could do the most reps. We put 350 pounds on the bar. And we had a contest. I did it 19 reps. And he did it like 22. It was, but with that, Bruno was a lot of physical training and that. The wrestling background, I had more wrestling than 99% of the guys anyway, just from all the high school and the college stuff. I kind of worked out wrestling-wise at Guido's barn, but not with Guido, with Bill Eadie. Me and Bill Eadie used to go down to Guido's barn and work out a lot together right when we were starting. Right. Which is kind of another weird story, because after me and Bill started, I didn't see Bill for 30 years. He was always in one place, right, and I was always in another place.
Weren't they the Mongols? Or the one was...
Well, Guido was a Mongol with Beppo, who was, Volkov for years. And I think Bill was a Mongol for a little bit. Right. Then he was 10 other things.
So I guess, what are some of your early memories of, when you first started getting on shows and stuff like that? Did it take a while to pick up the psychology of the business and stuff?
Yeah, it took a while for the psychology, because the psychology wasn't something a brand new guy thought about. I'll tell you, the very first experience I'll never forget. At that time, I was starting, and Bruno owned that Pittsburgh territory, but he just sold it to Guido. And I was starting off on some little shows around the Pittsburgh area before I ever went to the WWF. Right. And my very first show was in some little high school during the winter time, somewhere outside of Pittsburgh. Huh. So I go down, I'm in the dressing room, And I got the boots on and the tights on, and I'm ready to go. And back in the old days, there wasn't a lot of costumes. And Bruno never had one. I never had a costume either. I just had the trunks and the tights.
Right.
The old school look, I guess, for most guys, or a lot of guys. So anyway, here's the first thing you think about. We're about psychology. The guy says to me, "Okay, you're on first." Well, I kind of like get really nervous. I don't want to be on first. Put me on second. I don't want to run out there first.
Right.
My very, very first match, I'm not going out there first. So they put someone else on. So that bell rings. So I go, okay, I'm ready to go out. And I was nervous. I mean, you don't. Hard to explain how I was so nervous. I mean, as strong as I was at 21 years old, I could barely, walk up the steps and walk out. Man, I was so nervous and weak. As soon as I walked out, and this place was packed, probably a couple thousand people in this high school. But what you notice is I walk out like this, and everybody's staring at you, but they're all dressed. They got coats on and pants on and clothes on, and you're walking, and I felt naked. I felt so naked that I'm walking out in front of thousands of people, and everybody is dressed. And I got no clothes on. I might as well be a damn stripper.
Right.
I got these little tights on and nothing. And that was the first feeling I ever got, was naked to the world when you ran out there in front of the...
It's a good name for a book.
Then I was tired. I was so exhausted from nerves getting into the ring. I wrestled this guy. What the hell was his name? Buddy something, one of the little Canadian guys. And as soon as we tied up, he said, "Chinese armbar." I had no idea what the hell. I think it was a rib because I just froze. I went. So, but that was it. Naked to the world. I'm a real nervous wreck. Psychology. That didn't come till down the road.
What are some of your initial memories about your first WWF trips?
The WWF trips. Back in those days, I mean, it was kind of being in awe of things because you want to make it to the big time. And a guy like me, because I was young, but because Bruno was my mentor, and Bruno was the guy that told the McMahons, "Hey, I'm bringing this kid in as my protege," and the McMahons, who would normally not even look at me, would say, "Oh, great, Bruno." So I remember the first time I think I drove across from Pittsburgh, and I had my first little show somewhere around Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
Right.
And I remember driving there, and I was real excited. And I met Tony Gurria there and some other people, and they were all really nice to me. It was Bruno. And had a show there. I really don't remember much about the show, but after that show, I drove up to Connecticut. And I was going to, rendezvous with Tony up there, and then we were going to start doing some things. And I'll never forget that night, because driving up for the first time from New Jersey up into Connecticut, I was by myself. I'm a professional wrestler. I'm like 21. I got myself a new car, and I'm driving down the turnpike. And it's the first time I saw New York City. And you see the skyline, and you're just kind of driving by yourself, and it was a feeling of stepping out of your childhood and the childhood dream you had. Now I'm thinking to myself, I'm a professional wrestler. I'm driving past New York City. It's like 2 a.m. No one's around. You see the skyline up there, and it's kind of like the dream's calling you. It's like, hey, you're in New York City, and you're Bruno's protege. I mean, I didn't realize how cool it was going to be.
Right.
But I was, awestruck by the fact that, the little kid I was, which seemed like yesterday, I'm now driving, my car across New York City by myself, becoming a man, and starting this profession which I dreamed about. So it was a feeling I'll never forget that night.
Going back to early Vince Senior WWF, it seems that Bruno booked you a lot in the Pittsburgh area. Did other wrestlers have different parts of the Northeast, and how did you get jobs in other parts of the territory? Who was a fan of yours?
Kind of like a 2-part question. Well, there wasn't different parts. Pittsburgh was Bruno's territory when I started. Mm-hmm. But like I said, it was right after I started, he sold it to Guido the Mongol. And I think Guido sold it to Pedro Martinez. But that was right after that. I think McMahon, bought him out. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember the year, but you're talking early, maybe like 72, 73, even 74, 75. It was already, Pittsburgh was already part of the WWF. Probably the farthest part west. It went from like Bangor, Maine to Pittsburgh and south like to Baltimore, Washington, and that was it.
Because I think your first, looking back, the first outside Pittsburgh, you wrestled in Philly on March 9th of 74 against Johnny Rods. Remember that?
No.
No? Okay.
I remember Johnny Rods. But, got back, you wrestled every day back then. It wasn't like today where you fly out on Saturdays or whatever these guys do now. But it was just an everyday thing. But that early 70s, even after I started, I remember very briefly with the Bruno thing when I started. But it was that was a territory, that whole area. So if you worked there, you worked for the McMahons, and if you weren't, then you worked for some other promoter.
Right. It seems like 72, 73, you were starting out here and there, but 74 was like your big year where you got booked everywhere.
Well, 70, 69.
I know 73 you won Rookie of the Year.
Well, when I started, I was still finishing up school. But when I started in the little...
Because they said like April 1st was your first Garden show.
That could be.
Against Ed Sullivan.
Ed Sullivan?
Yeah, Eddie Sullivan.
Wow.
I
don't remember Ed Sullivan. I don't remember the first match.
And the second one you wrestled Jose Gonzalez, the Invader, the guy who killed Brody.
Okay, yeah. I wrestled Jose a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He was Monsoon's guy.
Right.
But I don't remember too much of the first guys. I remember the first Pittsburgh Civic Arena show with Slip Mahoney Dorso. I don't remember it.
Frank Dorso.
Yeah. Frank Dorso. He was a classic.
What are your early memories of Vince Sr.?
Vince Sr. He was a classy guy, the old man. He was, when I was growing up and you watched all the movies and the films and when you met Vince Sr., he fit right into the cliche of what a promoter was back in those days. He was always, well dressed, and he had the white kind of wavy hair, and he had an idiosyncrasy. He'd always have like 4 or 5 quarters in his hand. And as he'd walk around, he'd be, kind of like jingling these quarters.
I heard about that. So.
Yeah, and he'd always have, usually like Skolin maybe around him or somebody to do his bidding. But he was a smooth guy, and he was an elegant-looking figure. And it wasn't until later, down into the late 70s that I found out more about it. But he was a classy guy, the old man.
How's your early matches with Mr. Fuji? Was he kind of tough? I mean, everybody hears the Fuji reputation with the ribs. Did he pull any ribs on you early when you were young?
No, I was good. I lucked out with the ribs. I stayed away from the ribbers. Fuji was a great guy. He was a fun guy, and the ring he was great. You just had to be careful in the dressing room, but you couldn't fall asleep.
Right.
He never cooked you any barbecue, did he?
I had dinner at his house once. That was a classic.
What
But if you fell asleep in the dressing room, he'd lay tape over your shoe and light it.
Really?
So it would be like a giant hot foot if you were sleeping. But the thing with Fuji was, if he did a rib, all you could do was laugh and forget it. Because if you ribbed him,
it's on.
Then the shit's on. Then he'd re-rib. And you didn't want to get into that.
What was the worst one you ever seen him do?
God, you know what? I don't know. Probably lighting the guy's foot on fire is probably pretty the worst one. But it wasn't serious ribs. It was a little harmless ribs. The best night I had with Fuji and the Professor, Fuji invites us to his house one night for a dinner. I don't know what wife he had then or what. They were in some kind of an argument, so we went in the kitchen, we're talking, and he's going, God, the dumb bitch. And, I opened the freezer to get something. Inside the freezer, there's this little poodle. The poodle's like shivering because Fuji hates her poodle and was trying to get rid of it. He had the poodle shoved in the freezer. So we go out to sit at the table, and Fuji's sitting there, and out comes his wife with this big glass bowl of salad, dumps it over his head, lettuce and tomatoes everywhere. Fuji's just kind of sitting there with this thing under his head saying stuff like, well, party over, you all leave now. When the thing was over, he just told you to leave, and you all left. Right. So we figured, okay, good night. We all left. So later that night, me and Jack Evans are sitting in my pad, and we're laughing about this scene that happened, and all of a sudden we hear this loud screaming. and this like clip-clop sound, flip-flop, flip-flop, flip-flop. Outside, and I open the thing, I'm looking out the sliding doors, and here comes like this 300-pound lady in a white nightgown, flowing in the wind, running. I mean, a big fat lady screaming. And then I hear this flip-flop sound, and right behind her is Professor Tanaka in shorts wearing flip-flops, and he's chasing her, shooting her in the ass with a BB pistol. And then, I don't know what they went berserk, but then the next day, after we saw Fuji the next morning, me and Gorilla, he's got a big gash down his face where the wife took the high heel. So they must have had a hell of a fight after the poodle freezing incident. Never ended.
That's crazy. You also worked a little bit out in California. What was that like? I know you worked with John Tallis and Freddie Blassie out there.
Oh, it was an interesting time. Back in those days, it was. I did a couple little things. When I came in as Bruno's protege, Bruno wanted me to get a little polish, so I wouldn't embarrass him. Because if you were Bruno's protege, you'd have to be, good. So I went to, British Columbia for a little while and got a little bit and came back. And then they sent me out to California for, 5 or 6 months. And it was fun there. It was one of them things where you were home every night and had a good time. And I enjoyed, kind of like being a gypsy. But you got to check out the world. And, Malibu was fun. I lived in Malibu there. And out there, I bumped into, to stars, so it was fun. But I had one cool story that I'll never forgive myself for when I was out there. I did a match. I had some cool matches out there with Chavo Guerrero. I think one with Piper and maybe someone else. But I have a match with somebody, and I go back and I get a letter from this guy. Would you please give me a call? I want to talk to you about being in a movie. So I call the guy and I go meet him, and he gives me the script and he says, "Hey, I'm so and so. I'm making my first movie. It's a low budget picture, but I like the way you move for a big guy, and I'd like you to play this part." So I take the script home and I read it. And I'm killing people in the desert, eating babies, and I'm going, "What's this stupid nonsense?" And the guy wanted me to go out for 3 weeks in the desert, and a low budget was $1,500, $500 a week to go do your own stunts in the desert and all.
Right.
I said, "I'd make more money than this, hardly doing anything wrestling." So I told him, I didn't hurt the guy's feelings and tell him the script sucked.
Right.
So I said, "Look, I've really got the schedule. I can't do this." Well, his name was Wes Craven. It was his first movie, The Hills Have Eyes.
Wow.
And he wanted me to be in it, and I turned him down. That's how stupid I was. But we didn't know he was Wes Craven at the time.
Right.
So,
wow.
But then, I was in California a few months. It was fun. But then I came back to the WWF. I was in Florida for a week there. It was fun in the old days.
What are your initial memories of Andre the Giant?
My buddy. Andre was a hell of a guy. He was a hell of a guy. When we did, actually, I wound up doing a lot of traveling with Andre. Sometimes they'd bring him into the territory, maybe once a year. They'd book him out, like an attraction. He'd be in New York for a few months, and then he'd go to all the territories.
Right.
And had some fun. Andre was a hell of a guy. God, it was just too bad at the end. But great guy. We used to have a lot of fun. We used to go to Japan a lot together. I'd hang out with Andre because he couldn't take too many of the guys.
Right.
Because he didn't like too many of the guys around. But he was funny. I remember one time we did a thing where me and Andre were wrestling Killer Kowalski and Chuck O'Connor, and they were wearing some black outfits. I forget what the hell they were. So, and at the end of a match, when Andre would beat him, Andre would pick me up on his shoulder, and I'd go way above his head, and he'd hold me up and wave, and the crowd would go nuts.
Right.
So we have a match with Chuck O'Connor and Kowalski, who was under some hood. Andre beats him. Hey, the crowd goes nuts. Andre picks me up on his shoulder, and as I get up there, I go, "Whoa!" And I fall off on purpose, and I take this big bump, and I'm laying there in the ring. And on the way down, I could see Andre's face. He's going, he thinks he's dropped me because he never wanted to hurt anybody. He knew he was damn big. So I'm laying there like I'm knocked out, and I'm trying to do it as long as I can. Finally, my one eye opens, and Andre's face is like right here, but it's this huge, and it's like he's so concerned. It's like, finally I start cracking. So he's mad at me, so off he's stoned. So that night we go back and we're back in the motel. Me and Greer in this room, and checking some stuff out. And a bunch of the guys stop over. They want to go over to Denny's. So Andre comes in, and we're laughing about the rib I pulled on him. And Andre's sitting at the edge of the bed, and I just got out of the shower. So I got out of the shower, and all I have on is a little pair of underwear. And as I walk past Andre, he shoves me out of the room and locks the door. Now I'm stuck out in the hallway of this busy hotel in my underwear, and they won't let me in, and no one's going to let me in because Andre said, "Don't open the door." So no one would let me in, so I go, son of a bitch, I'm going down the hallway to make a call. I was going to use someone else's phone to call the manager. And as I do, I hear the door open, and here comes Andre and the guys. So I says, you got me. So as I try to get past Andre to get in the door, he tries to stop me, and he tries to grab my underwear to keep me from getting in. So actually, I took him down. So I dropped down, I hit him by the ankle and punched up on his knee, and he goes, whoa! And he falls down as I try to scramble. He grabs my underwear, and he just rips them right. And he rips them like in little pieces, and he's laying there laughing, and I'm going, oh, you bastard! Everybody's laughing, and the door shuts again. Now we're locked out. And they all run down. I'm standing there in front of my door naked with like this little piece of left underwear standing there waiting for the guy to come and let. It was a client. But he was a fun guy like that. It was, in fact, it was one story after another. Me and Gary are driving down the road following this little kid, Freddie. Freddie was about 17 years old, really small little pimply-faced kid. But he had this big butt car, so he'd drive Andre around. So we're following. So Freddie kind of goes through the stop sign a little bit in the rain. And some guy comes along, boom, and hits Freddie in the fender. So they both stop. Me and Gary is sitting there looking at him going, well, watch this stuff now. So Freddie gets out, this little kid, and the guy sees him. So the guy gets out of the other car, and he's rolling up his sleeves going, you dumb son of a bitch, you. And as he's saying this, the door opens. And Andre's head comes out, and he had the afro, so the afro was about as big as the car. Right. And then he gets out, and he stands up, and the guy goes, Jesus Christ! And he starts rolling down his sleeves, and he runs back to his car, and he shuts the door and locks it, and he sits there like this, waiting for the cops. And the funny bit what cracked me up is I know that guy's going to go back, and he's going to say, hey, some idiot pulled in front of me, and I hit him. Right. I was going to slap the shit out of this kid and teach him a lesson, but then this guy 9 foot tall stood up, and no one's going to believe him anyway. It's true.
What are your memories of your series with the Valiants?
Oh, the Valiant brothers. They were classics. Wrestling the Valiant brothers was a night off in those days because wrestling was very simple. But the most important thing about the wrestling, which was there in those days and not here in these days, is the emotion. And the Valiant brothers had heat. And whether it was the Valiant brothers or anybody, when they had heat, the match was a done deal. It was a great match before you even got in the ring because the people were ready for it. The Valiants were basically very easy to work with. Jimmy could do nothing. He just ran around the ropes, but then Johnny took a couple of good bumps, and they had their little thing. But it was very easy to work with them because they had heat. Today, the guys don't get heat, and they're killing themselves, and the crowd just kind of sits there, and if someone does like a really big, gigantic bump and falls through 3 tables, they'll go, yay! And then they'll just sit there and wait for something else. Because in the meantime, so what? But it was so phenomenal easy back then. I guess that's why a guy like me at 54 years old can still wrestle because we could have matches for an hour and the crowd would go nuts. But you didn't have to kill yourself. You had to be in good shape and you had to know some stuff. You had to know the psychology, but it had nothing to do with diving 30 feet into fluorescent bulbs full of thumbtacks. So it was great.
What are your memories about wrestling Billy Graham, the superstar?
Very short. I didn't wrestle Billy Graham much. I wrestled Billy Graham maybe a couple of times. And in fact, when Billy came in, it was kind of at the point, I think Backlund had the belt then, and I was kind of in the middle of, getting ready to do the Bruno thing. And I wrestled Billy a couple times, but Billy was very flamboyant, a great showman, great talker. And, he looked outrageous for the time. He was one of the first of the steroid babies that showed up. And but Billy never went long because he couldn't do anything.
Right.
You know, he wasn't a wrestler. He didn't know, but he was smart enough to know what to do for his character. And because of the way the fans were, and the heat was, again, Billy was someone that had heat and attention. So if you did nothing for 5 minutes but Billy walk around flexing and you get ready to go, and you gave Billy, you know, one arm drag, which he could take, and then fall and tangle himself in the ropes, you could blow the roof off the place.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, they were short and sweet with Billy Graham.
Besides being Bruno's protege, was there anybody back then that you looked at and you tried to pattern yourself after? Or who besides Bruno, who'd you learn the most from?
You know, there was a bunch of guys that would help me. Strongbow was very, helpful in telling me a lot of things. He was very smart to psychology, and even guys like Savoldi. Strongbow was probably one of the biggest helps. But in those days, a lot of guys, really wouldn't say much to you. What I did was I looked at every guy that was over. You know, I looked at Bruno, and I looked at Strongbow, and I looked at whoever the bad guys were, and I figured out for myself why they got over and other guys didn't. Because Bruno didn't do that much. A couple arm drags, he worked a guy in a hammerlock, and he'd sell, and then he put him in a bear hug, and that was it. But because he looked the part of a Bruno, that's all he had to do. Strongbow looked so much like an Indian that all he had to do was dance around and put somebody in a sleeper. But the bottom line to all these characters was people could fantasizably believe in them. When you saw Bruno, you could believe he could walk through a wall because he looked like it.
Right.
When you saw Strongbow, you believed he could put you to sleep in the Indian deathlock because he looked just like an Indian.
Right.
When you saw Professor Tanaka, you hated his guts and knew that if he gave you a karate chop, you could die because he looked like he could. You know? And what I got from all these guys is what I put in the Larry Zbyszko character for years, because the more I wrestled, the more the times changed where less and less people, took it serious. More and more people were smartened up how it worked. And it took a lot of drama out for him, but I got him anyway because of what I stole from these top guys. And the secret was simple, that no matter what they thought of wrestling, they believed Larry Zbyszko was a real asshole. Huh. So when I walked into the arena, they didn't give a shit if I was with Tommy Rich or anybody else, or if wrestling was fixed. They went, "Oh, this guy, Lando, he's just an asshole. He's just a real asshole. I want to slap him." So I always got heat and I always got a reaction, and I never had to do a lot because I already did what had to be done. I got the people emotionally to get involved.
What about your memories of Abdul the Butcher?
Abby Dula. Well, there's a few of them. Abby was a good guy. Everybody was kind of a good guy to me. Either they thought I could stretch him or I was a friend of Bruno. So, but Abby was a classic. In fact, actually I didn't see him too much. Here and there, and then sometimes in Japan. I mean, he was a nice guy. I'll tell you a funny story that I'll never forget. I was just starting, around the Pittsburgh area. And I had this stupid car, and I graduated from high school, a little Gremlin car.
I don't know.
My grandfather got me for a present. It wasn't a very big car, but, and I was like, 230-some pounds. Huh. This little Gremlin, so they asked me if I would pick Abdullah the Butcher up at some hotel downtown and drive him up to hell was it? Johnstown, or something a couple hours outside of Pittsburgh.
Right.
So I said, "Oh yeah, I'll go get Abdullah the Butcher." So I go over there, I pick up Abby at the hotel, and he comes out now, and he looks like kind of like Oddjob. He's got the suit with the vest, and he's got the derby kind of hat, and giant gold rings on every finger.
Mr. A.
The cigar, okay, but and he's strutting out with the bag. So he gets in the thing and he says, "Oh, you kidding?" So I go, "Hey, come on in." So now Abby is trying to wedge himself into this stupid Gremlin. So he kind of gets into it, boom, and he's kind of like filling in every possible space next to me and this gremlin. So we drive off, and as we're getting closer, he starts giving me this lesson. He goes, let me teach you some stuff, kid. And he wasn't that much older than I am anyway. He says, let me teach you some stuff, kid. Here's how you do it when you pull up to the fans. First, you open the door. Then you stick your foot out the door so people can see your alligator shoes. Then, you put out your hand to grab the door so they can see all your gold rings and chains. Like, this is what people are thinking.
Yeah, right.
I used to go and say, hey, yeah, there's the Batman, but I never, looked at what the hell kind of shoes he was wearing.
Exactly.
And then Abby says, and then you come out with the cigar. So he was telling me, all this spiel how to impress the man. So we get there, and I said, okay, here we are. She goes, now watch this. So he opens the door, and the foot goes out with the alligator shoe. And the hand goes out with all the gold rings. And all of a sudden he goes, hey, kid, can you push me out of here? I can't move. So here I am. I'm pushing this fat ass out of the stupid car in front of all the fans. So that was his classic entrance.
Did you like working him?
I worked with him a couple times, and it wasn't really my style.
Right.
I would rather go out there for, 20 minutes or so and tell a story and do some wrestlings and build up a drama and blow them away at the end. But that didn't happen every time. And characters were different. Abby wasn't much of a drama kind of wrestler. He was more of a terrorized kind of wrestler because, but there were certain guys, like he would do that, and the original Sheik was like that because you knew the Sheik wasn't going to wrestle, but you knew he was going to stab somebody in the eye with a pencil, and
right.
There'd be blood everywhere, and I just didn't like that for me. It was great for his thing, and wrestling a guy like Abby was easy because you didn't do much wrestling.
Right.
You fell out of the ring, you ran him into the pole, you started bleeding, he'd hit you in the head with something, you'd fall down.
Right.
In terms of wrestling or telling a story or putting on a match, it was easy. And Abby, maybe if you get 10 minutes out of Abby, before he collapsed. So wrestling in terms of what I did was easy with guys like that, but it was like far and few between. I'd rather do something else, which was to I should have been a golfer is what I should have.
Early memories of wrestling Killer Kowalski.
Killer Kowalski was my first big name match. Walter, I was doing some little bitty shows, around Pittsburgh in the high schools. Bruno still had the territory then. I remember Kowalski was there, so I came in one day, and I was used to wrestling like, Slip Mahoney Dorsey, or the local jabroni guys that we had, and the nice guys. They'd work at Walmart during the day and I'd wrestle on the weekend. And so I'm in there one time, and Bruno said, we're wrestling Killer Kowalski. And I was like nervous. But I was still young. I was like 22, maybe not even into the year. And Walter was walking out to the ring. I remember at that time, Walter looked like he was 9 feet tall. And he'd get in the ring, and Kowalski's thing, and everybody kind of had their own thing in the business. But one of Walter's things was he never blew up. That was an honor to him. He never got tired. And he never really did anything. He wasn't a wrestler. He was kind of what the hell would we call him? He was just constant motion. He'd be either punching you, kicking you, biting you, falling down, running around. But there was constant motion, but he never really did much of anything in terms of a story. But he prided himself on never blowing up and never getting tired. So I was kind of nervous. But we had a pretty decent match, if I remember right. But then afterwards, I went back to the dressing room, and Kowalski was laying down flat on the table and one of the guys was like pumping his heart. Kind of a rib saying, hey kid, you blew up Kowalski.
That's awesome. Whose idea was it to put you with Bruno as his mentor?
Well, it really wasn't no one's idea. It just kind of happened. Like I said, I walked in his yard, I introduced myself, started working out together. And he promised, if I finished college, he'd start me in the business. So I finished college, and he started me, in the business. And it was Bruno's idea to do the, protege thing.
What was Bruno like to deal with in those days?
Oh, he was great. He was a great guy. He was, he gave me a break in times when it wasn't, heard of. he was also a guy because in those days there was no contracts. There was a verbal agreement by promoters. If you were a top guy, you do good. If you were not a top guy, you never knew what was going to happen. And Bruno was a guy who would not only help me out, but he stuck up for a lot of guys because the guys, would come to Bruno and say, "Oh my God, Bruno, I can hardly feed my family. I did this big show. Vince gave me $100." Bruno, but they wouldn't go to McMahon because they were afraid because Vince would, fire them.
Right.
And then in those days, even though there was different territories, you had to be careful because, McMahon was working with the Crockett's who were working with these guys who, so if you really ticked off the old man, he'd call someone and the promoters would blackball you so no one would use you.
Right.
And there was a lot of weird politics like that. But Bruno would be the guy that would, go up and say, "Hey, come on, how could this guy drive there and you give him $100 on a big show?" And, but Bruno was the guy that would stick up for stuff. Actually, Bruno ran. That's a different story. But he basically ran the whole machine of the WWF for years. And that's kind of how it kind of led to the way Junior is today and some things.
Whose idea was it for the turn for you and Bruno?
Well, that was my idea. I was getting kind of point in my career where you're talking about 7-8 years has gone by, 6, 7, 8 years, something like that. And I was well known as Bruno's protege, but Bruno retired. Bruno was doing the broadcasting. He broke his neck earlier. He was sick of getting hurt. He just was done.
Right.
But in the meantime, that's another part of a long story. The WWF was not doing good. Bob Backlund was the champion. Nobody cared. And that was the beginning of the McMahons doing what they want instead of what the fans want. And they paid the price. The WWF was almost bankrupt. So I'm sitting there watching this and I'm thinking to myself, the business is so down. But it was down because the fans at the time, they didn't want Bruno to retire. You couldn't follow Bruno with anybody, let alone Howdy Doody. But so I went to Bruno and I said, look, I says, if you make a special comeback, here's my idea. I knew it would be big. I knew it would be huge because I didn't want Bruno to retire. And I figured if I didn't do it because the McMahons ain't doing that, they're going to be begging, and before I know it, it'll be Bruno and somebody. So I went to Bruno and I had this kind of idea, but I like to do something. Otherwise, I'm kind of like stagnant here. This would be a big shot for me, and then he thought about it and agreed, and then he took over, and then off it went.
Is there any truth to the fact that the heat with you and Bruno stems from Bruno feeling you pressured him into the program at all, or no?
No.
Okay.
You couldn't pressure Bruno into doing anything. He was the guy.
What was it like to work with Bruno?
Oh, it was heaven. It was you guys. I mean, I guess for anybody, it would be like being with the biggest and the best. Who's the biggest movie star today? I mean, I'm not that big. I mean, like the Pirates of the Caribbean.
Right.
I mean, like if I said to somebody, "Hey, I want to go do a movie," and they say, "Well, hey, work with Johnny Depp and be a Pirate of the Caribbean," that would be like, you can't get any bigger. So, I mean, for me to get in the ring, do that with Bruno, to me it was, the dream come true. But I was already getting a little bit mature, and I could see how it made my name in the business. I rode the me and Bruno thing for 20 years. Plus, now that I'm still around on TV, I kind of help keep the Bruno thing alive.
Definitely.
When you, at that time of the turn, I guess, was that 79, 80?
79 is, yeah.
Yeah. Was Vince Jr. starting to get more political power there? And were you like a Vince Jr. guy, or did Vince Sr. like you more?
They both hated me.
Who's more for the angle, though?
Well, I'll tell you, here's the thing. It's kind of more developed in my book, the whole story about this. But back then, the McMahons, like Junior is today, they're great promoters. If you can get yourself over, if you can develop a character that people will buy, the McMahons can promote you. They don't know how to create you. And back then it was a pretty stereotyped, cliche formula for professional wrestling. You had Bruno, who was the champ, 260, 70-pound guy. So to the McMahons, the opponent had to be a 300-pound. That's why all the guys were always so big. Koloff was 300 pounds. Billy Graham, George Steele was 300 pounds. Tanaka. I mean, whoever Bruno was wrestling was usually a big guy because that was their basic formula. When we came along with this idea, the young protege stabbing Bruno in the back, who was about the same size as Bruno then because he trimmed down a little bit, the McMahons, they didn't believe in it. Huh. It didn't compute to them that Larry's not a 6'6" ugly brute. How can this possibly work? So they didn't know. And then, but then they got to, that got kind of shoved out later. But back then, that's how you wound up with the Backlund thing in there too, because Bruno ran so much when he retired. The McMahons kind of resented the fact that even though they were the promoters, they didn't have control. The machine was run by Bruno because whoever he wrestled went up the ladder, wrestled him, and then went down. So it was really Junior in the early 80s that was getting more politically strong because he was the one that wanted Backlund. And that's how he is today. I mean, if the fans say, we don't want this guy, McMahon is going to say, I don't care. This is the guy. I like him. So,
right.
And they're still, dealing with that today. But that's when it was started back in the early 80s.
At that time when you found out that you were going to be main eventing Shea Stadium, which was probably the company's biggest show to date, how much pressure were you nervous and thinking like, how am I going to be able to do this? I'm the top draw of Shea Stadium.
You know what? I wasn't too nervous at Shea. I was cool with Shea. I got over the nervous stuff real early. As soon as we did the thing on TV where I hit him with the chair. As soon as that TV show, like that Saturday, I went to some show and man, it was night and day. I mean, people would love me before, but now they wanted to kill me. And I don't mean hate me. I mean they wanted to kill me. You can't do that today to an audience. It's not like it was. But I was kind of. But it was such an exhilarating because not only was it exhilarating from just walking out into people really just going berserk. Everybody in the business, the boys, all the secondary promoters, everybody but the McMahons,
right,
changed to me. It was like, oh God, Larry's here. It wasn't like, I mean, and we did, like 2 or 3, shows in Madison Square Garden, and we did shows in all the big arenas, Boston and Phillies. In those days, you could do that. So by the time we got to Shea Stadium, I was already cocky.
Right.
I mean, I was, in fact, Bruno wasn't sure. McMahon thought it would bomb. I told him, I said, we will sell out this son of a bitch because I can feel it.
Right.
Bruno wasn't at all the shows. McMahon was at the racetrack. I was the one that was out in all the shows. And I said, there's no way. Because you didn't believe in it all that much. And Bruno, thought it would do good, but never thought they'd sell out Shea Stadium in those days.
Right.
They wouldn't sell it out today.
How much jealousy was there towards you since you were like this new kind of heel? Was there any jealousy with the established guys?
There was no jealousy that I felt in that area. In those days, again, there was no contracts. And the guys who were on top there at the time were older guys. They were the Putskys and the Strongbows and some other guys. It wasn't like it is today where you got schools and you got a whole bunch of young guys getting into business. There was no one hardly getting into business because they didn't want you in. It was a feeling where the guys, because I was there 6-7 years, and they were all really proud of me because they all took a little hand and said, yeah, well, I remember I told Larry this and that, because he was Bruno's buddy. And so it was, I became a hero to the guys. In fact, Hulk Hogan used to call me his hero. At this time with Bruno, Hulk came in, they brought him in because he was a big guy and they needed someone big for Andre to beat up because Andre was so big.
Right.
So, and Terry was getting kind of frustrated because saying, hey, man, brother, you know, I mean, what should I do? Because I was getting beat up every night.
Huh.
So I'm one of the guys that gave me advice and said, well, get out of here for a while. Don't stay here. And he got a break with the one movie, but then Vern Gagne, when he went to the Gagnes, actually Vern was the one that made him a baby face and made the character. Vince stole it. And Vince could promote the hell out of it, but he couldn't create it.
Go ahead.
At that time, did how the guys worked Hogan back in the '80s when he had the title? They got paid more being in the main events. Was that similar to the '80s and the '70s?
Yeah, well, that's how the structure was. I mean, the way the structure was, the champion would get the most money,
right,
and the guy who wrestled the champion would get almost as much, but not as quite. And then the semi-main would get maybe half or better than what the main event made. See, it was a weird structure. I mean, if you were the main event at Madison Square Garden, you'd make $6,000 for the night. Back in the '70s, if you were the opening bout, you'd make $150. If you wrestled for Vern Gagne and you were the main event in St. Paul Civic Center, you'd probably make the same $6,000. But if you were the opening bout at the St. Paul Civic Center, you'd make $1,500.
Right.
It was
Really?
a bit different.
Oh, wow.
Huh.
It was different. You know, some guys are much better payoff guys than other guys.
So Vince Sr. probably wasn't the greatest payoff guy for the underneath.
No, for the underneath, he wasn't a great payoff guy. They took care of their top guys. But their structure was different, too. They had some more partners involved. When you run the Garden, Vince Sr., his money, that was his town, the Garden. He lived month to month off the Garden. And the only reason he could live month to month was because every month Bruno sold it out.
Right.
But, you know, the Garden, the Garden would take 50% of up to so much and then 70% more. And you got New York City tax, New York State tax. God knows how many unions and state athletic commissions. So by the time you got done with the Garden, it wasn't, you know.
Just looking back kind of with the titles and everything, the Intercontinental title came about around that time. Why didn't they give you the Intercontinental belt? It seemed like Backlund was the babyface champion. They probably, you think, would go with the heel. Why did Patterson get it and not you?
They didn't like me.
Huh.
Basically.
Why?
You know, I'm really not sure of the whole thing. It was probably a combination of things. If I remember right, the Intercontinental belt, when did that start?
'79
Was it that late?
fictitious
Was it that early?
Rio de Janeiro tournament.
Yeah, 79, 80. I was Bruno's guy. You know, he was really my mentor. You could say I really was his protege. McMahon and Bruno did not get along at all. Bruno can't stomach the McMahons. And
Even Vince Sr.?
No, he that's another long Bruno story, but he didn't. He could care less. He just used them for money.
You would figure that since the Garden was his moneymaker,
Vince Sr.
Bruno sells it out, he should be.
Vince Sr. would kiss Bruno's ass.
Uh-huh.
Bruno didn't kiss. No, Bruno was the man. So, but I think what happened was a combination of things. One, when me and Bruno were doing our thing, because of the situations the McMahons were in with, and then some things they were trying to do to me, because I wouldn't take shit. I wouldn't kiss ass, one of my big problems in my career. And I wouldn't take shit. And as far as I was concerned, Bob Backlund was a flop. And when I was doing these shows with Bruno, they were selling out. Backlund wasn't drawing shit. But the McMahons had the cliche in their head, well, Bob's the champion. He should get more money. I said, Bob ain't worth jack shit. All he's got's a belt that you gave him.
Right.
So I should make more money. I don't give a how do you keep the belt? So we had an argument about if I was a main event with Bruno, I make main event money. I don't care what you pay Backlund. But I'm not making less than Backlund.
Right.
Champ or no champ. So to make a long story short, which is in my book, I wound up kind of holding them up when I wouldn't wrestle until they gave me a whole bunch of cash up front. But then there's more to that story because I was kind of young. I didn't know how to do that. Someone else was telling me how to do that. That was remaining neutral, and the McMahons never knew.
Right.
But they probably put it together later. So there was a combination of them not wanting to deal with me because I was Bruno guy, and I wouldn't do at the time.
Who was advising you?
What they would tell me to do. You have to buy the book.
I was gonna.
Dusty.
No. You think about everything I told you.
Right.
But back then, you know, so I wouldn't play the game because I knew they didn't know what they were doing. They wanted puppets. I wouldn't be one. Plus, when me and Bruno got done with our angle, the end of 1980, early 81, I think the old man was dead or about ready to die. But we didn't know it at the time. But the old school ended after that angle. That Shea Stadium basically marks the end of the old era, and it was the beginning of the new. A year or so after that, everything was different. There was no Brunos or Strongbos. It was all the Hulk Hogans and the Ultimate Warriors. It was all the characters. And you know, the old man died. Vince Jr. took over. And what Vince Jr. was into was the surrealistic characters, which got over real good for a while. But they were all the gassed up, larger than I refused to take steroids. I would not get involved with that. And none of the guys could wrestle. I mean, they couldn't do the craft we learned. All they could do was stand there with their arm out, and then they invented the clothesline back in the early 80s, and most of the guys that can't do nothing are still using it today.
Huh.
But so it was a combination of me not kissing butt, being Bruno's guy, and not shooting myself up with steroids to look like everybody else that he was pushing at the time.
Hogan in his book says that him and Andre drew the house at Shea Stadium. What are your thoughts?
I heard that. And I did an interview for the paper, and I'll say it again. Remember the days when you called me your hero, Terry? Because you know better. It's a lie. I mean, if Bruno and me were the only match that night, it would have sold out. People didn't care. I mean, you had the Japanese. The Japanese, if I remember, didn't even get paid. They just wanted to fly over and be on the card.
Right.
Be on the card for publicity for Japan.
Right.
You know, they had some tag matches. They just didn't care. And at that time, you know, that's when Hogan was going through his problems because he didn't want to be a jabroni for Andre, but that's what he was. And what, third or fourth match, Andre beat him in 5 minutes or 3 minutes. That was his big Shea Stadium debut. Right. Terry! Give you a spanking.
What was Bruno's early opinions of Hogan at that time in the 80s?
I don't know what Bruno's opinions was, you know, like when he first came around. And it wasn't so much, you know, the Hogans or the Warriors that Bruno, you know, cared about or even thought about. It was the McMahons, because Bruno knew that, you know, it wasn't Hogan doing this or, you know, this guy doing that. It was they were doing what McMahon was telling them to do, especially at that time. You know, down the road they became big stars, things changed. But back in the early 80s, you know, to Bruno and some other old school guys, the things they were doing to the business, you know, they felt weren't good for the business. And it really wasn't in the long run. It took off for a couple of years because it was novel. And then Vince got on NBC, which made it very big and novel. And for the first time, it became cool to watch wrestling instead of being a wrestling fan. But that novelty wore off quick, and you had a few guys that made household names of themselves. But then for years, it became very, very hard for everybody else because the drama was gone. The mystique was gone. And then we basically had to start over.
Why do you think they kept the belt on Backlund for 6 years? I mean, after, Shea Stadium was 80, that was his second year, and it was not going anywhere.
I can't tell you. I don't know. The only reason I know why they did it was because Vince Jr. liked Backlund.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only reason. It didn't matter if he drew money. It didn't matter. For some reason, I don't know why, but Vince Jr. liked Bob. So Bob had the belt.
Did you like working Bob Backlund?
Yeah, I had a great time with Bob. Bob was a wrestler. So me and Bob, could get in the ring and have good matches because we both had kind of the same style. Or we could do the same, kind of match.
What led you to leaving the WWF?
They didn't want to pay me, so I left. Well, you know what? It was weird because after the Bruno thing, I still had a lot of heat on me.
Right.
And, of course, the McMahons were up to their games where promoters had funny games back then. If you were promised a 3-shot program like in the Garden, to you, it was good because it meant money. You went, hey, I'm going to make 3 main events. Boy, these 3 months, I'm going to make 20 grand just in that one shot.
Right.
You know, back in those days. So, but again, you know, promoters get resentful. The McMahons at this time, because Bruno ran it for so long, Vince Jr. especially, wanted the power. He wanted the control over his own business, which wasn't bad in theory. It's your business.
Right.
You should have control, but do you want to have control so you make money, or do you just want to have control so you lose money, but you're the boss? But I forgot the damn question.
I was just asking you what led you to leaving WWF.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was basically, the thing was over, and they were trying to, like, get revenge on me for standing up for myself. So they would pull stuff like, you know, I drive to Boston Garden, where I had a program set up to wrestle Morales after the Bruno thing. So it was supposed to be me and Morales for 3 months, you know, in Boston.
Right.
So then I get to the arena, and Angelo Savoldi would come up and say, oh, well, you know, this is great, but, you know, Vince changed it. He just wants Morales to beat you.
Uh-huh.
So right away I would go, ding, 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 ding. Oh, they're trying to give me the shaft trick. It's not 3 shots. Because in those days, if Morales beat me,
You're done.
I'm done.
Right.
It ain't coming back next month. People don't care. They've seen the payoff. So I was ready for them. I said to Angelo, and this happens some other times on Monsoon. This is all in my book, how this works.
Right.
So I said to Angelo, I says, hey, look at that. I didn't tell him that, you know, I know it's the swerve job. I said, look at that. I can't let Morales beat me because Bruno never beat me. And that way, you'll make Bruno look bad. And Bruno was so powerful in those days that all Savoldi and all they can say is, well, that's right, because Bruno never beat me.
Right.
He did it on purpose. And I could always use that against the powers to be because they couldn't argue with that.
Right.
That's how strong he was.
Huh. How did you wind up in Georgia Championship Wrestling?
I drove. How did I wind up in Georgia? You know, it's an interesting story. I'll tell you, seeing you asked. Again, I mean, you know, I got done, you know, with the Bruno thing.
Right.
Well, actually, I was in Georgia once before. That was the interesting story. You're talking about the mid-'80s?
Yeah, I'm talking when Ole was booking.
Oh, you're talking about Ole. That was a more interesting story even before.
Go ahead, talk about it.
I was still Bruno's protege in the mid-'70s, 75, 76. And, you know, we'd wrestle a little bit, and then they'd send you out of an area. So Bruno called up his buddy, Cowboy Bill Watts, who is the biggest asshole I've ever met. And Bill's proud of it. He'll tell you he's a big asshole. So I go down to Florida. Bill Watts is booking for Eddie Graham. Eddie Graham hates Bruno from old stories in the old days. But Bruno kind of trusted Bill Watts. So I drive down to Florida, get an apartment. I'm there like a week. And I go into the TV place, and I bump into Eddie Graham. And Eddie Graham says, oh, you're Bruno's friend.
Huh.
So I might as well just pack my car then.
Right.
And left. But the thing about Florida was in those days, which was rare, they had one TV show that went out of Florida and showed in New York. It came out of Long Island or somewhere.
Right.
But the TV they made in Florida showed in New York. So the only stipulation of me going to Florida was with Bill Watts is I couldn't do anything bad on TV because they were going to bring me back as Bruno's protege thing. So Bill Watts says, okay. So we go to the first taping after a week. And Bill Watts comes up to me and says, hey, you're wrestling the Mongrel. I think it was the El Mongol or the Mongol. It might have been the Mongol. And it was one of their top bad guys.
Right.
And when I saw that, I said, oh, we're going to have either this is going to be good and it's a program,
right, or
this is bad. So then I talked to someone else and they go, yeah, the Mongol's going to beat you up in about 2 minutes. And I went, excuse me, can we have a talk, please? Well, now, Bill Watts, who really thinks he's a tough guy, he's a big asshole. I mean, I'll never forget this. We're sitting in an office. I go in, and Bill's sitting there. And I come in, I sit across from Bill. And I'm a young kid, you know, I'm still like 26 or so, 25. And Bill Watts throws his pencil down. He says, I know what you're going to say, kid. Bruno told you this if you come down here. Well, let me tell you something. I don't know if Bruno's giving you the straight stories. And now he's kind of telling me Bruno's bullshit, which I know ain't true. So I'm looking at him, and he's going, if this business was a shoot, there's some guys wouldn't be in this business like Bill Watts would be. Right. So I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, well, thank you very much. Well, I said, look, I'm very nice. I said, look, Mr. Watts, I said, thank you very much, but that's just the agreement I had. And if you don't want to do it, that's okay. It's fine with me. I don't care. You can fire me. I'll go home. I didn't want to be in Florida anyway. Right. Kind of cliquey. So he said, well, anyway, you're fired. Thank you, sir. I get up and I leave. Right. I go. Right? So I go back to the apartment and I call Bruno. I says, well, your buddy just fired me. That son of a bitch. Anyway, Bruno's on the warpath. It's kind of an insult to him. But in the meantime, McMahon kind of promised Bruno would go to a couple of places. And Bruno didn't want to. And one of the places he was signed to go was Georgia, where Jim Barnett was running the Georgia territory. Right. And they kind of worked with Florida a little bit with some talent going back and forth. So it was just kind of funny because I was young. This is one of my like young introductions to the political nonsense, how wrestling was. So I'm in Atlanta. So Bruno says, will you just come back here and I'll teach them a lesson. So Bruno cancels all of his appearances because he didn't want to do them anyway. Right. He used me as an excuse. So Barnett got to notice that Bruno is not coming to the brand new Omni to do his big show because Bill Watts fired Bruno's boy. So I'm ready to drive back. So I get a call from Jim Barnett, who is a very interesting guy. Nice guy, Jim Barnett. Jim Barnett was a flaming $3 bill.
Wow, my boy.
Flaming. Oh, fab, boo. I mean, he'd sashay through, but he was one of them kind of likable guys. Right. He was a harmless guy. So I get a call. Barnett flies me into Atlanta for a meeting early Saturday morning when they're doing their TV. And it's the first time I met like Robert Fuller and Jerry Briscoe and the guys that were kind of working around there, and Abdullah was there. And Bearcat Wright, I think it was Bearcat Wright, was managing somebody in Florida and managing Abdullah in Atlanta. So Bearcat was there when I got fired for not doing what they told me. Right. And then Bearcat was in that room when I walked in Saturday morning to have a meeting with Barnett. So I don't know anybody. I'm probably kind of quiet. I'm just kind of standing there. And all of a sudden, Bearcat Wright sees me. And the guys are like zombies because they were wrestling the night before. It's Saturday morning. They're half hungover. And I'm standing by a doorway, and Bearcat's by another doorway. And Bearcat looks over at me and he says, hey guys! And he points to me, and just as he does that, Jim Barnett and Cowboy Bill Watts walk in the doorway and are standing right behind Bearcat Wright. And Bearcat yells out, that's the kid that told Bill Watts to go fuck himself! And all the guys are going, oh, jeez. And I'm going, why? And Bill's like, you could fry an egg on his head. And Barnett's just looking at Buzz. He don't care. So he goes, oh, my boy, come with me. So me, Jim Barnett, and Bill Watts wind up in this little office, and I'll never forget the speech Barnett gave me. And it had nothing to do with me. They could give a damn. They want Bruno to come to the Omni. So Barnett says to me, he goes, oh, my boy. He says, you're a good-looking boy, and I think we have a place for you here in Atlanta. Of course you do, Jim, if Bruno comes, right? Of course. So he says, I don't think, I'll never forget this line, I don't think any of my boys should make less than truck drivers. So I'll give you $400 a week, which was like not bad, for a beginner in those days. You worked 2-3 times in Atlanta, but a new car was $2,000 and gas was 21 cents, And then he makes Bill Watts apologize to me. But so Bill Watts leans over, he goes, and he's biting his tongue. He's going, yeah, I really hated to fire you in Florida, but if I didn't, Eddie Graham would have. You're a good kid. And he just wanted to kill me. And Barnett's just sitting there, making Cowboy say that. Well, thank you very much. So that's how I got in Georgia the first time.
Wow.
But then I met Ole, and Ole was a Polak, and me and Ole got along really good. So then, after I didn't go to New York, I did a little in the Carolinas, but then I did a little bit in Georgia too with Ole and Buzz Sawyer and Tommy Rich.
Did you like Ole as a booker?
Well, I got along good with him.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he was a character, and he was kind of a gruff, old school kind of guy. And it was still, Georgia in them days, they had a little different theory. Vince was already kind of going in one direction.
Right.
The rest of the promoters didn't know what to do at that time. Some of them were trying, the old schoolers were trying to stick to the old school, but then at the same time, they're looking at Vince going, well, Jesus Christ, these guys are starting to make some money. They're becoming stars. What are they doing? So it was a kind of a transformation kind of time there. But I had a good time.
Did you get more exposure, you think, from Georgia since it was on TBS?
Well, TBS was real good exposure at the time because it was nationwide. And that was like the beginning of it. The early 80s was the beginning of the nationwide cable systems, which changed the business, for the promoters and the guys. And the ESPN with the AWA was good too when it was
right.
nationwide.
Oh yeah. What are some of your early memories of guys like Jake Roberts, Tommy Rich, and the Road Warriors down in Georgia?
The Road Warriors. I remember when the Road Warriors first came in. They came in and they really didn't have a look. They just had like crew cuts,
right,
and no makeup, and they're just kind of but they were one of the big influx of the steroid baby era, where no one could wrestle, but they were so gassed to the gills that they looked surrealistic, and the audience was still naive to this. To the audience, especially the wrestling audience, they were like, what they would consider a superhero would look like.
Right.
Nowadays, the audience would go, hey, you're on steroids. Oh, you gassed. Whoa, it means nothing. It was like stupid to take it because everybody knows.
Right.
But back then, it was like, an awesome thing. And the Warriors, actually, someone took, I don't know if Ole did or something, they took them to a hairdresser in Hapeville, Georgia. And they went there and they got their dues. And when they came back from that hairdresser, I have no idea who it was, they had their look. Joe had the one look.
Right.
And Hawk had the two stripes. And they made it in Georgia. Some hairdresser just kind of gave them a couple different looks like that. And then the Road Warriors took off.
Wow. What about Jake? What do you remember of Jake?
I never really hung around Jake all that much. He was in and out quick. I think he might have went to New York then. The only thing I did with Jake, I handed Missy Hyatt off to him. Me and Missy were fooling around a little bit, but she was like 17 or so, a little young, but then she was, she was really gorgeous back then when she was a kid, but she wanted to move in, and I wasn't ready, and so I passed her to Jake, and I think he passed her to Mansfield.
And then to him.
Yeah, that was
You too?
Yeah. That was a couple years back.
Poor Missy, she apologized to me once. I'm sorry I didn't put you in my book. That's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all right.
That's funny. What about Tommy Rich? What are your memories of Tommy?
He was a cartoon. He had a different adventure every week. Hey. Tommy was like in his own planet. It was kind of weird. He was one of these guys. I had an hour match with him. That was one of the best hour Broadway draws ever. Harley Race was watching it. And when we got back, he said that was one of the. It was unbelievable. Tommy could go in there and have a hell of a match. And he was with some of the right guys. And he's high as a kite. God knows what he's whizzed on. His only thing was at night. Every night we'd fly to Columbus out of Georgia and work that territory around Ohio, and a lot of good money was up there.
Right.
And every week, Tommy Rich wrecked a car. Every single week, the police would find him overturned, laying in a mound of plastidills and beer and upside down in the car. And that lasted about 2 months of flying into Columbus. Then we couldn't fly into Columbus anymore. We had to fly into Charleston or someplace because no one would rent us a car. Tommy Rich wiped out all the car rentals. So.
That's great. What is your memories of how Tommy became NWA champion? There's a lot of rumors regarding this.
Well, I don't know. When I went down to Georgia, Tommy was already there. It was Barnett was there, and Ole I think was booking for Barnett. And I've heard of Tommy, but when I went there, in the days of Buzz Sawyer and Tommy, and I don't know who else was there. But he was already kind of there, but I don't know where he came from. Or, you know.
What about your memories of your series with Paul Orndorff?
Oh, and Killer Brooks?
Yeah.
God. Well, you know, it wasn't very long, so I really don't remember a lot of it. I remember at the time, what we wanted to do at the time, what they should do today, is swerve the people. Always make a 90-degree turn from the obvious, or what people think's going to happen. And back in those days, like it was with Kurt Hennig and Bockwinkel, you know, people thought I was going to get the belt at a certain time. So we swerved them. We did a thing where Kurt, and I slipped them the mysterious roll of dimes, but Kurt won it. But no one thought that would happen. And the same thing back in the Orndorff day. People thought that something was going to happen. So instead of me, you know, beating Orndorff, we did something where, you know, Brooks, I helped Brooks win it, but then I bought it from Brooks for $25,000, which in those days was the first of its kind. No one's ever bought a belt. It was sacrilegious to buy a belt. Belts were sacred.
Right.
It's not like today where everybody's got one. You know, so back then it was you know, one of the things people talk about, because I bought the belt from Killer Brooks, but I really don't remember all that much about it. I remember having a couple of matches with Orndorff, but nothing a long time. I think it was a time when he probably took off to New York shortly after that.
You worked the Superdome, I think, right, with Bill Watts?
Yeah.
Memories of that? Or?
Yeah, that was with Mr. Wrestling #2.
Right.
Bill Watts still didn't like me. Yeah, I went there and worked with, and he was cordial, you know. It was kind of interesting. You know, Bill, I mean, like I say, he's the biggest asshole you'll ever meet. He's proud of it. But then even WCW, when he was in there too, we had not really a run-in, but politics were changing. But then he'd make a comment to me, you know, I always respected the kid. Because if you tell him, right, you know, there was guys that would like you more if you didn't take their shit. Right. And Bill was kind of one of those guys. And even McMahon's kind of like that too. I mean, he'll shit all over you if you let him. If you stand up for yourself, you're taking a shot. He might like you or he might not. You never know.
Right.
Depends what, you know, side of bed he gets up.
Did you work Mid-South just that one time, or how long were you down there?
What's the Mid-South?
For Watts.
No, I never worked for Watts. I was in there in and
time.
out, yeah. It was like a big show they did, yeah. But never worked for that territory.
How did you wind up in AWA?
There's nothing else left.
Right.
Yeah, you know, well, you know, we're just kind of at the Crockett. I think Georgia was, you know, probably maybe even going, but there was two organizations left of the territories at that time. It was the Crockett's,
right,
and then there was, you know, Gagne, and maybe some remnants somewhere that I never dealt with. But Vern Gagne was an old wrestler. He was an old Olympic wrestler. He liked wrestling. I think we did a couple of combination shows when the Crockett's and Vern tried to run together, like in the Meadowlands in Jersey and some things.
Steve Flair.
And, you know, my name just got around, but it was hard to get in the AWA. There was a waiting list. It was really a great territory to work in. You'd make a bunch of money all winter. The summer months, Vern hardly ran because it was not a good time to run, but you did TVs.
Right.
So you had a lot of time off in the summer, but you still made TVs. But then all winter, you'd make some real good money. But it just kind of, it just was a territory I wasn't at. I had a name, and I wasn't, you know, we had the Carolinas a little bit. So I made some calls. And I think I was talking to maybe Greg Gagne once. He says, yeah, we got to bring you in. Yeah. So then they brought me in, and I had a couple of matches. And because I could wrestle and do what they liked, you know, I found a home there.
What are your initial thoughts on Vern?
Oh, he's a hell of a guy. I mean, my view of Vern's different because he's my father-in-law. Vern to work for was, you know, one thing. But he was a typical old school promoter. And I was kind of raised by him, so I got along good with him. A new guy trying to work with an old school promoter was kind of different. But you know, he was, you know, I got along great with the guy. Let me tell you a funny story how these guys think. Because their mentality only reached a certain limit in terms of certain elements. When they were having the war, McMahon was doing good. You know, the Gagnes and the Crockett's were trying to compete with the McMahons. They were on Nationwide, ESPN, and TBS, and he was on whatever. So there was kind of like this big war going on. So the first time I go into the AWA, I walk into the office, and the secretary meets me, and the door's open so I can see past the secretary at the Vern's office, and all I see is these legs disappearing up into the ceiling. Huh. And I'm looking in there, and Vern has got Jack Lanza standing on his desk, with, pushing up the ceiling pieces, and because Jack was like 6'6", and Jack's head's up there, he's looking around for bugs. Because Vern is convinced McMahon's got his office bugged. Because someone found out something, right? So there's info leaking out, so Vern's convinced McMahon's got the office bugged. He's got Lanza standing on the desk looking for it. And I'm in the secretary, Vern will be right with you. I'm like, okay. And Vern's sitting there looking up. Anything up there, Jack? And no, nothing here, Vern. God damn it, Jesus Christ, I know this thing. And so boom. So Jack comes down, gets off the desk, and comes out, and hey, how you doing, Jack? And Vern's in there doing something. All of a sudden you hear, Jesus Christ! Boom, and the telephone comes flying out of Vern's office. The cord breaks and the phone's bouncing along the floor. And Vern comes out, what the hell is that? And what the secretary did was, in those days when they first got, like, for 90 cents, you'd get one of them little, like, sticker digital clocks.
Right.
And you'd stick them places.
Okay, yeah.
So the secretary stuck a little round plastic digital clock on the telephone.
Right.
And when Vern saw that on the phone, he thought that was the bug. And he flipped out and heaved this thing. Now, what the funny bit was, Lanza, who he had searching for the bugs, was the bug.
Right.
He was the one telling Vince everything, and then shortly after that, he left. He's been working for Vince for the last 20 years.
Wow. That's crazy.
Cartoon, eh?
Wow. How did you wind up dating Vern's daughter?
Oh, God.
Did you guys get busted, like, at a concert or something?
Yeah, we got busted. It was weird. It was weird because I was single for a while and I was having a good time, and Kathy was a real cool chick. She was in the office doing some things, and I knew her a couple of years before that.
Right.
And then I left for maybe a couple of months. Then I came back, and it was really weird because one day, after knowing her for a couple of years and not even thinking about it, and one of the main reasons I didn't even deal with it, because she was Vern's daughter.
Right.
And when you're growing up a promoter's daughter, the thing you don't want to do is you don't marry a wrestler. That's her thing. And I figured, oh, God, another one of these spoiled rich broads. I didn't want to deal with it. And then, even the stigma with the boys. Oh, you're trying to get the job. So I didn't even bother with them. One day, Kathy's at this computer by the thing. I says, what are you doing? And she goes, oh, look at it. And she types in something when the computers first comes out. It says, good morning, Kathleen. Right. Something simple. And she kind of looks at me like, didn't I do a good thing? And I'm thinking, terrific. But I looked at her, but then there was some kind of light that went bink. And I remember saying to myself, no. No, come on. And she had the same memory of that.
Right.
And so some months later, we would do promotions together. We'd be out in Vegas promoting together. So we started spending some time together. And she was a really cool chick. And she wasn't at all like I thought she was. Because Vern was, different. Plus, when I married Kathy, Vern was millions of dollars. So I'm thinking, And then the more me and Kathy, had a good time and started getting serious, the only thing I could hold against her was the fact, okay, the boys, okay, you married the boss's daughter, so you want to be the champ and have a job and you married the money. And that was the only thing negative about the whole thing.
Right.
And finally, after a little while, I was, well, screw it. We had a great time. But we snuck around for almost a year. Because of the way things were. And so one day we're at the Moody Blues concert. And we're sitting there and the intermission comes on, the lights go on. And who's 2 rows behind us is Greg and his buddy.
All right.
Oh, shit, there we are.
All right.
That's why we're busted. So the next day I get a call, Vern would like to see me in his office.
So you knew.
So I know the jig's up. Right? So here's what I do. So I go in. The door opens, I walk in, and as I walk in, Vern, you can see him starting to get up. He must have practiced for hours to get the speech out. And he was getting up, I went, Dad! And that kind of blanked him out from whatever speech he had planned. But then we had off real good. I mean, we got along real good. It took him a while, but then, it just lasted so long.
Right.
That worked out real good.
Hogan was in the territory for, a very long time, AWA, and how did Vern take it when Hogan left for Vince?
Well, he took it bad. I mean, I wasn't there when he did, but, I know the repercussions, and it was two things. Even when Heenan left, Vern took it bad and took it personal. And you really, it's something you can't blame the guys. It was just a different time. But back in those days, we had like a code of honor. And your code of honor, your word was your contract, and the code of honor was a 2-week notice.
Right.
You give the guy a 2-week notice. If you're pissed at him and you're going to quit, you still have to give him a 2-week notice. Or the promoter wants to get rid of you.
Right.
He gave you a 2-week notice or 2 weeks worth of pay or something. And back in those days, that was the first time when, things were going nationwide. And actually, Vince did what promoters didn't do. And I don't know if it was just the changing of the guards or if it was agreements that, Vince's father would more have with these older promoters.
Right.
That, you would never do this to the other guys, but you'd work together so the talent and everybody would make money. So Vince, kind of started that out and stole Hogan from here and Piper from the Crockett's and Junkyard Dog from Watts and the top guys from every territory. And Vern took it real hard. Not so much like it would hurt him money-wise, but it was a slap in the face of tradition because guys like that, there was an honor. And instead of, saying, hey, I can't compete with this, the guy wants to give you, $1 million, I can't do it, go ahead, but finish your shots for 2 weeks. That was the code of the road. So it did, but it's kind of hard on both. You can't blame the guys for taking the money, and you can't blame the promoters for, being kind of hot.
What are your memories of your series of matches with Nick Bockwinkel?
Oh, Nicky. Well, they were classic. Nick was very smooth. He was great in the ring. And, being in the ring with Nick was a night off. And our styles, worked together perfect. The only thing about Nick, it was great work with him. The only thing about Nick at the time was it was too long already. When I was there, and I think one of the problems AWA had, I was there, and they had some younger guys that coming up like Kurt Hennig, and the Warriors were kind of in and out, and there was some other guys. McMahon already took Jesse and Bobby and Hulk and some others. But really, Nick was already too much Nick at that time. Nick was already getting too old. It was too much Greg by himself. It was time to pass the torches and change things. Where I shouldn't have been working with Nick, so much. At first it was Greg, but then it got to where if you watch the WWE, you got a whole bunch of new guys. If you watch this show, it's Nick for the last 20 years, but he's 40-some years old. So there was some. It was great, but it could have been better, business-wise.
What are your thoughts on Bruiser Brody?
Oh, Frank, he was a classic. Frank was a good guy to me. We had a good time, but Frank was not a good businessman. His MO was, for some reason, to really give promoters a tough time. And I disagree. I like Frank, but I disagree with his philosophy on business because he was kind of an attraction. He was a big guy. He'd go somewhere for 6 months, and then go somewhere else for 6 months, and he made some good money. Did great in Japan,
right?
But for some reason, and I don't know why, he'd go in there for 2 or 3 months and beat everybody, and then when it got time to wrestle the main event, he'd show up for a couple. But when it was time for the main event to end and the good guy be the hero, Frank wouldn't show up. So that really killed people's business. Right. And it was a nasty thing to do. I couldn't figure out why Frank did it because he wasn't a bad guy. And all he would have done was make more money. And who gave a shit? And then he could go somewhere else and do the same thing and then come back in a year or two later and just constantly make money. But he had a very nasty habit about that. And unfortunately, he did it to the wrong guy in the wrong place. And that's what happened to him.
What are your thoughts on Stan Hansen and how things turned out with him in the AW title?
Stan was all right. I'm not sure what happened. Did he take off with the belt too?
Yeah, he did something like
Lawler did too.
I heard what he did is when they did the no-show, he kept the belt, and then he took the belt outside and he ran it over with his car like 20 times and then sent the belt back to Vern all destroyed.
Well, that was Lawler.
Yeah, but Hansen did
Hansen might have done it too. I'm not sure what the deal was. I know Lawler had the belt once. When I came in the first time, they wanted me to work with Lawler.
Right.
But then by the time I got there, Lawler took off.
Huh.
And he wouldn't send the belt back. So Vern had to threaten to sue him. So I think Jerry took a hammer and dented it all up. Okay, good.
Huh.
And then sent it back. And so that's why my belt, the World Championship belt I had, was a different one. It was actually a remake of the first belt ever made. It looked like a police badge because the first one was made by the Boston Police Gazette for Frank Muldoon in the 1800s or so. So Vern copied it. But Lawler did that. I think I remember something about Stan, but I really don't know. Again, Stan had kind of a attitude problem too sometimes. I really don't know why. It's like Bill Watts said. Some of you guys wouldn't be in this business if we did it right.
What are your memories of young Kurt Hennig?
Oh, Kurt was a nice kid. He was a nice guy. And that's really a sad story because he was a real fun, kind of like, he was a lot like me. He was a fun-loving guy, loved the business, great in the ring to work with. Then we'd be out golfing a bunch or at the casinos having a good time.
Right.
A little rib player, but never did anything to hurt anybody. And it's really too bad. I remember him when he was a skinny little kid.
Huh. With his dad?
And then he got bigger and bigger and bigger. Never got quite as big as Larry. Larry was unbelievable.
Yeah, he was huge. Members of Scott Hall.
Scott Hall, my buddy. I think I'm a big influence in Scott Hall's early career. He kept saying that. And then he just did some other interview with somebody where someone said he talked about me a lot. Because
right.
I was one of the guys that had some of his very early matches when he came into the AWA. And I think that after working with me in the ring, he was like amazed how easy it was and how easy it was to do things to make the people go absolutely crazy. And so we got along good. Scott Hall is one of these guys that had a great charisma and a great look, but I think he had a problem with success. A lot of these guys that came into the business don't love it. I came into professional wrestling because I loved it. And it didn't matter to me if I made money some years or didn't make money. I didn't think about getting hurt. I didn't care about not being home, or being a gypsy. It didn't bother me because I was a wrestler. Some of these guys got in the business not so much because they were wrestlers or they loved the business. They were like bodybuilders that knew somebody or had a look or had a friend that said, hey, why don't you try it, and
right.
So someone like Sting, he was a bodybuilder in Texas that didn't have a clue, wasn't very athletic, couldn't wrestle, that's why I have a paper bag, but was with the right place, and then, what's the makeup on, will be the dingoes, and,
right.
Okay, what are the dingoes? Put the clothesline on because he can't do nothing. The next thing you know, for some reason, someone thinks he's a somebody, and he lucks out. But, but then he kind of snapped, and now he's seen the light, and he's a preacher. He's a nice guy, Steve, but he didn't love the business. He just wound up in it. And
right.
I think Scott Hall was another one of these guys that liked it, but there wasn't the love. And then when you get to be a star, the pressure of it and the responsibility you have is not what you wanted in life. And that's why I think some of these guys can't handle the pressure of being a top guy.
Right.
And then they drink too much or they do too much of this. And I think Scott's cleaning up. I hope he'll be okay because I like the guy. He's a nice guy, but some guys just, they like to be it, but the responsibility of being a top guy is different. In fact, one of the reasons that this business is in a flat, stale shape it is because our stars of today don't love the business. They don't give their responsibilities and their hearts to the business. They'll be in the business a couple of years and get a movie bit. See ya, I'm gonna be a movie star now. So you leave the territory without a hero because
right.
now you're a movie star,
huh.
or you get a big break for a couple of years and I don't want to do this anymore now. Boom. And so you're gone. So, I mean, now they make stars. They make a bunch of money quick, but they don't love it. So they don't pass the torch. They don't got the responsibility of showing up to keep the business going, to build up the next generation.
Right.
Like, I mean, Bruno, there was times that me and Danucci would pick Bruno up out of the car and carry him into the arena because he couldn't walk.
Wow.
And then they'd rub him down and he'd drink some wine and he'd get out there, and if he couldn't walk, he'd sell, but he'd still go 15, 20 minutes in agony.
Right.
Because he was the main event. And if he wasn't there, the town would die and the guys wouldn't make money. It was his responsibility. And that's the difference today. Today the guys go, well, I need my Decadurablin shot. Can't possibly show up tonight for my clothesline, so I don't care if the house dies and all you. I've got a contract. And unfortunately, we got these guys that's how it was then. And today it's kind of like, guys are stars that don't care. So, too bad.
What are your memories of the Midnight Rockers? Did you see potential in Shawn Michaels?
You know what? It was funny. It was, Jannetty was the one that had more of the personality when the Rockers came around. Shawn was a nice kid, but he was kind of the quiet kind of kid that was, working good. You really didn't pay much attention to Shawn because Jannetty was the one that he was the outgoing one. And really the one that kind of had more charisma of the team. And just Marty, I think, just kind of kept going off the deep end.
Right.
And Shawn just kept going. Shawn became a great worker, but when they first came out, he was kind of the quiet one of the two. And Jannetty was really the one that got more of the attention and was more flamboyant, but was more in outer space.
Huh. What are your memories of your series of matches with Sergeant Slaughter?
The Sarge. Had one in Chicago where Bockwinkel gave it a 10. Well, Sarge was easy. Sarge was a character. And so when a character gets over, when the G.I. Joe stuff was popular back then and all that, it was easy to work with. It was like, and Sarge for a big guy, could do some things too, but it was easy. I mean, when you work with someone that's over, it's easy.
Right.
So Sarge was over, so, it was easy. Plus we knew each other and did matches, back in the old WWF days. So by the time the AWA days rolled around, it was nights off. In fact, anybody who wrestled in those days, whether it was Saito or Harley Race or Nikita Koloff or Slaughter or Bockwing, these guys were like pros.
Right.
And it was so easy. Today I watch these guys and they got a 10-minute match and they're back there for 3 hours. They're going through 3 squirt bottles of water just to talk over the stuff. What are you talking about? I got to ring with some guy and he goes, what are we doing? I said, well, I'll schoolboy you. Oh, then what? Well, that's it. What about the rest of the match? Then don't worry about it. Well, they can't fathom. But those guys were pros. It was
Ray Stevens?
Great. Well, it was one of the best.
Right.
In fact, Ray Stevens was the one that I came up with the idea about Kurt and Bockwinkel. Stevens is the one that had the idea about. It was his idea with the slipping the roll of dimes and running up and having the change out of the pocket. So that was kind of his gimmick. Oh, he was a classic Ray. He was a fun guy too.
You think Vern ever fell out of touch with the business?
Not for what he believed in.
Right.
He was in touch with it a lot. And then when it would start changing, it's not like he lost touch with it. His beliefs just wouldn't go
too old school.
Yeah, but all old school means is you do what you have to do to make money in a system that gives the fans drama. And the new school is basically we don't care about drama. We just want to give you a big production. Fireworks, music, bodies falling from the sky. Buy these dolls, buy these. Everything is lights and production, but there's no drama. You know what the most popular thing in today? I mean, I wind up watching it. I've been doing this so long before it was popular. It was the silly poker tournaments. People watch poker tournaments all day long, and all the guys do is sit there, and they do this.
Yeah.
And people are staring at the TVs going, but there's drama. This guy goes all in. He's wiped out.
Right. Yeah.
In wrestling, their theory now is no one even ties up. One guy's in the ring, one guy has to run down the ramp, shoot in, they start punching, they flip around, and the people are sitting there. They'd rather watch poker where people don't do absolutely nothing because there's no drama, and then the old school, it was a drama, it was a thrill. Now the thrill doesn't come from drama, it just comes from, either a dead body or something blowing up or music but it's a cheap thrill.
Right.
That's why the business is down.
Any other big memories that stick out for you for AWA?
Well, I tell you what, I pulled off a hell of a stunt with this fighter that went real good. When I had the Ninja Mr. Go, me and Scott Ledoux.
Right.
We did canvas back Ledoux, but that was kind of unique, and that went over real good. I mean, people got into it, and Ledoux did a hell of a job, and I think that kind of boxer wrestler match thing worked out real good back then, and that was one of my fond things back in the AWA. I had a great time working there. It was like one of the last of the territories.
It was Ninja Go. I heard he had the worst breath of anybody. That was the guy from Portland, right? The Japanese guy.
There was 3 of them.
Really? I heard he was notorious because he would eat garlic and every day, like Korean barbecue, and he'd always breathe on the guys.
Well, you know what? I didn't get close to it. There was one from Japan, Mr. Go. He might have been the Oregon guy.
Right.
Then he went back to Japan or something, so we put Steve Olsenowski in the Mr. Go outfit. And he was a classic. And after a while, it was like the Pollock trying to be the ninja.
Ninja O.
So then we brought this kid, Sunji, who was about 6'6", and we called him the Super Ninja.
Huh.
He was a kid from Japan. Nice kid. He's probably still over there working.
Is it true that when Dale Gagne revived the AWA, he offered you the belt and you declined?
I don't remember that. What year was this?
I'm not sure. Recently, right?
Recently?
Dale Gagne?
Yeah, probably.
I'm not sure what year it was.
It was
maybe 89, maybe.
89.
Was it?
I think because it died. AWA went out of business when 90.
90-ish, maybe.
Yeah, maybe 91.
See, I don't know the whole story. I know, Dale Gagner was kind of a little local Weasley hustler for some of the time.
Right.
And then he was calling himself Dale Gagne, which is not his name.
Huh.
And he was running shows around there with AWA signs and names. Vern tried to sue him for a while or have him stop it, as he still owned the name for some years, but it was like so Mickey Mouse, and Dale's got no money. So it was like,
What's the point?
What's the point? So, but then I have no idea what went on with that. I just, all I know is it wasn't that long ago, maybe a year or so. I don't know if I talked to Steve Carino or Dale Gagner for a little bit, saying something about Steve Carino is now the AWA champion. They're going to do something, or some group in Japan wanted to do something with the AWA.
Right.
So I said, well, we'll talk about it. Give me a call back. Let me know what kind of money we're talking about. And then I never heard from anybody. So, no dough, no show.
With no dough.
No dough.
No dough. What are your memories of Starrcade '87? And actually, before you left the AWA territory, how did Vern take it that you were going to NWA?
87, I left. Wow, I'm going to go back in some brain cells here. 87 Starrcade. Is that the one with Bobby Eaton of the War Games? Or?
Nah, that's when you went to Crockett and you were with Gary Hart and Al Perez and.
That was before Baby Doll.
Yeah, Baby Doll was afterwards. Starrcade. I think he came in, wasn't it a TV title, NWA TV title, something?
You guys. Well, you know what? I was with the AWA a little bit, and things were working out okay, but I wanted a bigger push at the time. But again, the politics were still, like I said, a little too much Bockwinkel, a little too much. Vern was holding on a little too much to.
Do you think Vern was like? I mean, he had Nick Bockwinkel as his champion. He was like 53.
Yeah, it was too much. It was too much. Yeah, but I think it might have been even to the point, but after Jesse took off and the Hulk took off and this guy took off, that maybe at least Bockwinkel, Vern figured, won't take off with the belt, so he won't screw me over like the other guys just did. So.
Well, we did a Mean Gene shoot. He said that when Mean Gene first left and went to New York, Mean Gene and Vince called Vern at the office and offered Vern $10 million and a spot in WWE, and Vern told him to go to hell. Is that true?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure, but
That's what Mean Gene said.
I would have taken the $10 million and said, "Look, take the $10 million. I'm not working and doing nothing. I'm going to Vegas with a beautiful deaf mute." But that's what I would have done. But there was egos. Those guys, to make that much money, you need an ego because it's beyond money.
Right.
It's beyond money. So it was just too much. But then I went down. I think I went down because it was time to take a break. I wanted a bigger push in the AWA, and they weren't ready yet. And in the meantime, I was talking to maybe Dusty or somebody, and he had this idea. I thought it was with Baby Doll, with me and Baby Doll. I did do a little bit with Perez, but then Perez had a different attitude. He was never happy.
Right.
So I think they kind of cut that short. But then me and Baby Doll had this thing where we were going to do the, expose Dusty with the secret pictures.
What was that going to be?
In the manila envelope.
She still has it.
Yeah.
Never know.
What was that angle going to get? How was it going to go down?
You know what? I'm really not sure of the exact program of it because it didn't get off the ground. Back in those days, they weren't all that far out, but Dusty there was some kind of picture. Baby Doll still has them. She's got the envelope.
Right.
She's got the picture. There's some kind of picture of Dusty, some goofy, weird thing.
Right.
And we were just about getting ready to expose it. She was out there. We're doing the interviews, threatening him with the blackmail.
Huh.
And then Dusty was going to come out to confront her, and she was supposed to give Dusty this big, juicy kiss.
Right.
Which was supposed to symbolize the kiss of death. But Baby Doll was married to Sam Houston at this time, kind of like newlyweds, and he was an idiot. And he was jealously freaking out. And so when Dusty came out, she was afraid to give him the kiss of death. So she said something and didn't kiss him and walked on. And Dusty was fuming.
All right.
So they fired her. So when they fired her, that ended everything. That ended the whole... And people still talk about it.
Oh,
what
yeah.
was in there, this and that. So I just talked to Baby Doll. She's still got the envelope. She's still got the pictures that were in the envelope. I don't know what's ever going to happen with it. Maybe it'll pop it up on TNA with Blackmail Cornet.
But she doesn't have Sam Houston. Here's Sam Houston is now working in the pit crew with Jeff Gordon in NASCAR.
Is he?
Yep. Remember he was a
mess when
we seen him in ECW shows in New Orleans. He was like
you gotta be kidding. If you were
he was a ditch digger. He was working the graveyard. He was the guy who would dig the graves.
That's about
now he's working in NASCAR. In the pit
how
crew.
the hell did he get in NASCAR?
That's crazy.
I wouldn't drive a car that came out of a pit with Sam Houston. I'll tell you that.
Wait, we saw him at ECW in like '99. He wasn't even coherent.
No.
What
was it when you went to backtrack NWA? Was it any different for you being in a small fish or being a small fish in a big pond as compared to being the man in the AWA?
When I went back to the NWA,
Right. Did it feel different? Because now you were, a small fish in a big pond.
Well, it didn't feel that different at the time because I didn't really get the championship belt and the big top push till I went back to the AWA the second time.
Right.
And so, I was with the AWA and it was doing good and had some fun. And then actually, me and Kathy kind of got together then. And when I went to the NWA to do the Baby Doll thing and some other things that didn't work out, Kathy took off with me. And and then we had our first kid, John, in Charlotte. But then I was there, and then when the Baby Doll thing, kind of fired, and then actually we had a meeting. It was when WCW was just about to get started, and we had a meeting with the WCW people. Turner came and talked to the NWA people because they were buying it out. The Crockett's mother has had enough,
right.
And she cut off the money. So the Crockett's had to sell it. And Ted liked the programming on TBS. So he bought it. And I remember the meeting coming where the guy from TBS came in and said stuff like, well, we're going to buy this over, we're going to take it over. And at first, you won't think we know what we're doing. But we do.
All right.
And I remember saying to myself, no, you don't. You don't have a clue what you're getting involved in. So they were getting ready to buy that and start WCW, but I didn't like the politics at the time. So at that time, a combination, I called Greg back and we talked again, and I think that time they just wanted their daughter back too. So off I went back to the AWA, but I knew it was the last days of the AWA. And it's kind of interesting story because here's what we were trying to do. I met the people with TBS. They brought Jim Herd in to start the WCW stuff. I went back to the AWA, and Vern at this time, we should have shut the doors already, but he wanted to stay in a little while longer and try something. So that's when I was there, and we had the belt. But the time I had the belt, when I was finishing up there, we were having meetings with Jim Herd, and we wanted to do an invasion angle. We wanted to have, at that time, and WCW just got started, Sting had the belt at that time, I think. And we sat down and had a talk, and they wanted me, who was the AWA champ, and some other guys,
Right.
to bust in and invade WCW, which was just starting out from the NWA, like in the invasion,
Right.
which later turned into what you know as the New World Order. But this is how it started. And we were going to come in and invade. They wanted me to wrestle with Sting, belt for belt, and everything was looking good. And then comes Jim Barnett back again. And Jim comes in, and Jim was still stuck in the old school. He was saying stuff that was cliche for 10, 20 years before that. He told the people at TBS, he said, well, listen, my boy. He said, you've got to be careful, because if Zbyszko comes in the ring and wrestles Sting, he can eat our champion up and make us look very bad. Which was kind of a thinking of the old school guys. I mean,
Right.
If you're the territory and you did something like this, if Lou Thez had a belt and some nobody had a belt, but he was over, you wouldn't want Lou Thez to come into your territory, because if he wanted, he could beat the hell out of this guy and kill your business.
Right.
And Jim Barnett, who meant well but had no idea what he was talking about, put the idea in the head of Jim Herd and the WCW people that, Sting's a new kid, doesn't know how to wrestle, but he's got the makeup, we're giving him a thing. But
Right.
if Larry comes in, Larry can just, and make, the AWA, but it was shady too in them days, because Vince just stole guys, so no one trusted people yet.
Right.
So it was kind of weird, but Barnett kind of came up with that stopped that idea. And after that idea didn't work, Vern decided to close down, and then Herd wanted me to come in WCW anyway. And the invasion angle never happened. But who was sitting there in the office when we were doing this was Eric Bischoff. He was selling Rubber Ninja shit for Vern.
Right.
And that's where, a few years later, when Eric weaseled his way into WCW, where the invasion angle came from. The New World Order.
Right.
Which is what I used to call the world on my interviews, because I worked at prophecies.
See, Bischoff says that he got that whole NWO from a show in Japan with the UWF Shoot Fighters and the New Japan guys. He always, because they sold out the Tokyo Dome. And he always says on interviews he got the NWO from Japan, but...
Of course he does.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And when you went to WCW, what did you see any politics?
Hogan sold out Shea. Bischoff got a brainstorm. Everybody stole something from somebody.
Did you see a lot of the politics between Dusty and Flair, since Dusty was Booker back then?
I might have seen it, never paid it much mind. Me and Dusty always got along good. I don't know. Dusty and other top guys like that in those days, had that thing that they were very careful, because if you were really good, they didn't want you replacing them.
Right.
And Dusty always, was decent to me, and always made nice comments to guys like the Crockett's. I remember one time I did an interview down in Georgia talking about how I'm going to beat Tommy Rich up so bad that they're going to engrave him in Stone Mountain next to Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis and the rest of the all-time great American losers. And the Crockett's got so ticked off they wanted to fire me because they're from the South. And Dusty, I think was the guy that says, well, it's just, Lady Zbyszko's great. He's just standing there.
Right.
So, so he appreciated it, but I'm sure there was Dusty and Flair are kind of like the same kind of people, characters.
Right.
With the egos, and they're kind of in their own world. Flair's way out there.
Right.
But I'm sure there was maybe animosity, but maybe not. They worked with each other so much, but there's always that little bit of jealousy, and then Vince is weird too. I mean, like if Dusty would be booking the Crockett's, and all you'd hear about is how great they are and how they're going to kill the WWF baby. And the next thing, what happens? Dusty's working for Vince, dressed in spots, cleaning out toilets.
Right.
That's because Vince wants to make sure he gets the last laugh. So Dusty's cleaning out toilets after 10 years of knocking him. So the whole business is just such a stupid soap opera. It's very entertaining.
What are your memories of the York Foundation teaming with Terry Taylor?
Did I team with Terry Taylor?
Yeah.
I thought it was Rotundo.
Was it?
It wasn't me. I did a little bit with the Dangerous Alliance.
I know you were with Arn too.
Yeah, me and Arn did the Enforcers, which would have been really cool, but it ended quick.
Did you like teaming with Arn?
Yeah, Arn was great. Me and Arn got along good, and I drove him nuts, but he was a workhorse, but the characters fit good. I mean, like, some guys, it doesn't work. Me and Arn clicked, and you could feel it. We did the Enforcers for a very short stint in WCW. But when we walked down to the curtains, you could feel the energy. So as soon as we walked out, we went, oh, this is going to be easy. This is going to be good. I mean, me and Arn clicked. And we had some plans where we wanted to, we were going to be the Enforcers, and we were going to be on the cover of the new magazine, kind of dressed like Elliot Ness with the toothpick and the Tommy gun, kind of dressed like the old gangsters because we were the Enforcers. And it would have been a hell of an idea, but the politics in WCW just kept changing. At that time is when Bill Watts came back in and ran WCW for a while. And so I went into broadcasting then because I didn't want to get killed.
You worked with the Steiners and Barry Windham and Dustin Rhodes in some tag matches. What are your thoughts of those guys?
I'd much rather work with Barry Windham than the Steiners.
Right. Stiff.
Well, the Steiners, Rob's an easygoing guy. And stiff, solid, but it should be stiff and solid. It's just when it comes to the crazy stuff, they're crazy. I mean, a punch or a hold, stiff, solid is great. But, I mean, then standing there and letting Rob Steiner hit you in the head with a chair or something isn't great. That's stupid.
Right.
Because they're kind of crazy. Scotty's the one that's funny. That's kind of the temperamental one. In fact, I didn't even know it. I kind of found it out one time. Me and Arn are wrestling the Steiner brothers, right? And Rob was around, but now Scotty's kind of new. Scotty comes in. And I really didn't know Scotty. Arn knew him more.
Right.
So we're in the ring. So I start, and it's me and Scotty Steiner. And we're going to go do something. But, back then the heels ran the show.
Right.
Well, not to the Steiners, So I didn't know him yet. So we go to time, and all of a sudden Scotty, out of the blue, shoots in like he's doing some double leg takedown. And it was just an instinct. I just front face locked him.
Right.
And I'm front face locking him. He's trying to fight it, and I'm trying to make it look cool. And he backs me into the ropes, and so like I let go, and he backs up. He's going, and I don't realize it, but he's pissed off now. Right. I don't know the Steiners that much.
Right.
So as I go over to do something, I do it to Arn. He leg dives me again, like from the side, and I sidestep him and I quarter Nelson him, and I got his face shoved in the mat. But now I can feel him. Now he's fighting. What are you doing? And I look at Arn's going, oh, you're fucked up now. Oh, brother. I had no idea that Scott Steiner was now losing his mind and was really ticked off. I had no idea. So I let him go again. Now he's up there. So I go over to tag Arn. Hey, no way, brother. The Arn tags off. He won't tag. So I look over and then Rob, he's easy going. He's laughing. Scotty, he wants to fight. Like, what are you doing, you idiot? So I said, you gotta be kidding me. So anyway, we tied up and he goes behind me and I fall down. Right. And he goes, I got you. Yeah, you win. You got me.
That's awesome.
You got me. You were too quick. Anyway. Well, that's not us. I met the Steiners.
What are your memories of Paul Heyman from back then?
Oh my God. Paul Heyman, he used to follow me around White Plains, New York, and in that area when he was 12 years old.
Little magazine.
Taking pictures, and every time you turned around, you went to a certain town, there'd be little Paul Heyman. Little Paul Heyman running around with his camera. Let me take a picture of him. I was running to take a picture of him. The next thing I know, he's a manager. Paul Heyman, he must really love the business to extend all the energy he does In fact, if he spent half the energy he does being more, probably on the level or kosher or more to the business, he'd get a lot more results than doing what he does. But he was a good manager. The thing about guys like Paul Heyman is if he comes out for 2-3 minutes being a manager, he can get heat. If you see him the whole show, it's annoying. It's too obnoxious.
Right.
But I got along good with everybody, but I would never work for him.
What are your memories of Steve Austin, and are you surprised at his success?
I'm proud of his success. I'm not super surprised. Steve was good. It was kind of a weird time, too. And WCW had the same problem at that time. I know Steve was frustrated. When I first met him, he was stunning Steve.
Right.
With the long hair and Lady Blossoms. And, he was kind of looking for a break and didn't know what he was. He kind of had, kind of going bald, but had long hair, kind of like some other guy, kind of looking for a character. But Steve is one of these guys that came along. He was the right place at the right time for that character. Steve could do. Let me see if you know this. Steve could do with the character what no one else could do before him, and that's what catapulted him. And he was good enough to back it up in terms of talking and good work, and so
right.
He was good. But something happened at the right time and place that he was at that made him able to be that kind of character. Do you know what it was? Aha!
I'm not sure.
Did we stump the band? Cable TV, you still couldn't do it on TBS or TNT, but on USA or whatever Vince was on at the time,
Right.
You could get away with the language barrier. Steve Austin was the first guy that could come on national TV and kick your ass. He was the first guy that could look tough and talk tough. You couldn't say ass on TBS. You couldn't say ass or anything like that on TNT. It was turned to a squeaky clean.
Right.
But Steve Austin had the right look at the right time, but he could come out because of the way the cable laws were, and he was the first one that could talk tough on television. If someone else would have been there and talked tough, but everybody else was going, hey, I'm going to beat you. I'm going to save your mother. But he was the first one that, I'm going to kick your ass. I'm going to break your ass and drink a beer and kick your ass. He was the first guy that could do that.
Right.
So that's what made Austin. It was the right place at the right time. Like Hogan was the right place at the right time. And Austin, and they go like that. So.
What are your memories of the Arn Anderson Sid Vicious Scissors incident?
Well, I wasn't there.
Right. Oh, you weren't on that tour?
I wasn't in that English tour, thank God. I was doing the broadcasting. I think that's when I went to the broadcasting stage because of the politics. But
right.
I really can't comment other than I would, whatever happened, there's no need to do what Sid did.
Right.
It's kind of silly. From what I heard, he just kind of suckered him outside a door and stabbed him with a pencil. But that's the sign of a coward. I mean, people think because you're big and all gassed up to the gills, you're tough. Guys who are tough don't run up behind you and stab you with a pencil.
Right. Scissors.
Or whatever.
Yeah. Memories of the War Games you're involved in?
What?
The War Games match?
Memories of them?
Yeah.
I don't have that many. I've done so many matches. Certain ones stick in my mind. The War Games, to me, weren't something I liked. I like to go in there and do a match and tell a story. And to me, the War Games was more of a cluster. It was what wrestling was turning into because they were trying to draw money by doing War Games and triple cages.
Right.
And all these off the wall things. And the reason they were doing this was because they didn't know how to do anything else. The art of booking was becoming a lost art. The guys in power didn't know the art of booking. So they kept doing what kind of stemmed from a Southern promotion. They started doing hot shotting.
Right.
And they're still kind of in that mode today. They kind of hot shotted themselves out today. And to me, the War Games was a hot shot thing. You got so many guys in the ring. it was more of a cluster, hot shot thing than it was a program where people were emotionally involved. There was a difference. I wasn't big on those kind of matches.
What are your thoughts on Lex Luger and how things turned out for him?
Well, Lex was one of the guys who had a great look. He came in the era of the steroid guys and rode that wave. He wasn't a good talker. He wasn't a good worker. He wasn't a wrestler, but he looked great.
Right.
He was one of the guys, 3 clotheslines and a torture rack.
Huh.
And to me, he was a lucky individual who was in the right place at the right time. He had a great charisma for being a heel because he was a true narcissist in real life.
Right.
I mean, I remember one time me and Sting and Lex and someone else were in Steve's backyard talking.
Huh.
And as we were walking, Steve had like big glass sliding doors. You could see your reflection.
Right.
So we're talking, and then when we turn around and stop, Lex is still back there because he saw himself in the window.
Right.
And he couldn't move. He was so engrossed in how good he looked. But that was his charisma. It's too bad it happened what happened to the guy because that's pretty heavy duty. I mean, it's bad enough having a girlfriend across town with the wife on this end.
Right.
Why you would do that, and then Elizabeth dying, and I mean the whole thing was really bad. And I'm sure Lex went off the deep end, and I think he might have been on a suicide watch for a while. And I just seen Lex the other day.
Right.
And he seems happy. He seems like he's getting over it. But to go from, a millionaire to jail suicidal is, one extreme to the other. And that is something that's got to be hard on anybody. So just the fact that Lex didn't bump himself off and he's trying, at least good for him.
Right. I guess in WCW, who's your favorite booker up until Bischoff?
In WCW?
Yeah.
God, that's a tough question. They didn't have any good bookers in WCW. They had
all corporate guys like Kip Fry and all.
Yeah, well, they had like Jim Herd,
right.
And then he was going. Then they had Kip Fry, who was kind of an off-the-wall attorney, if I remember right. Then they tried, then that didn't work. So then they tried, they had a committee for a while with Dusty on it and Jim Barnett. Then they tried wrestler things for a while. They brought Bill Watts in.
Right.
And that didn't work. And then they tried to find someone who wasn't a wrestling again. And that's what kind of, Bischoff weaseled his way in there. The only thing Eric had going for him, unlike the Turner people who didn't have a clue, and Bill Watts, who was a complete egotistical asshole, Bischoff hung around wrestling for a while, had an idea, but Eric was smart enough to pick the brains of certain guys.
Right.
He picked my brain a little bit. He talked to someone else that he knew. He was smart enough. He was smart enough to use the knowledge and ask other people for a while, and then he got too smart and lost control of the whole thing.
When he actually came into power, you knew him from AWA. What were your thoughts on him?
It kind of surprised me. The weird part was I was there when he was going after that job. It was him and some other people was going after the job of maybe, I don't know if they called it the executive producer or something else. When I heard of it, and I knew he was trying to get it, and I know where Eric came from.
Right.
And the other guys that were trying to get this job, to me, I thought it had to do with the production end, maybe, more or less, the camera people or the buildings or, it didn't dawn on me that this guy would wind up in supreme control of the booking. It's too bad nowadays they call it writing and they have writers. Writers is a cancer. Wrestling is not a show that works like that. And these people, Vince doesn't care, he's beyond it. Hopefully that the people at TNA will realize no matter how good you are at business, licensing, marketing, television deals, whatever, your booking is the heart and soul of your product. If you don't have a booker who knows the business, you're going to spin your wheels and spend your money. And WCW really never had any. Eric came in, and he smart enough to listen. He had this idea in his mind of the invasion thing, which was a great idea that was talked about before.
Right.
And was able to pull it off. And, again, success, I've discovered in this world, whether it's wrestling or business, it normally has to do with being the idiotic luck out guy who's in the right place at the right time. Ole and some other people were in there when Turner said you can do this. When Bischoff, got the job, Turner, for some reason, I don't know why, maybe this pissed him off, let go a lot of money. Turner at that particular time said, I want a 2-hour show Monday night opposite McMahon. I want to go after this business.
Right.
And I'm releasing millions of dollars. The other promoters didn't have the money to work with. Bischoff wound up in a position at the right time when Turner wanted to do this. So Bischoff had the ability to say, hey, look, Diesel, we'll be able to pay you this much and get you from Vince. So we had the ability to finally do what Vince did to other promoters.
Right.
Offer some guys money that the people before didn't have. If Turner would have came in and said nothing, Bischoff would have been there a year and then there would have been some other guy in there.
Right.
But he was in the right time when Turner wanted to fight.
Do you think that with the veterans, the wrestlers that have been around for so long, when they heard that Ted Turner wants to go opposite of Vince on live TV, and they knew that Bischoff was going to be in charge, most of the veterans think that like Bischoff was getting in way over his head. Did they think he was going to fail? I mean, did you think that WCW could really pull it off? I mean, when I first heard this as a fan, I was like, this is crazy.
Oh, you know what? I knew, I felt the opposite. When we got things going, I mean, Bischoff was there at the right place at the right time. But then we were able to do this because Turner wanted it done. But once it got started, as far as I was concerned, because I knew the business, and Eric was there who listened to people, and Turner wanted to do it, and our ratings were going, and everything was getting big, there was no doubt in my mind that not only would it succeed, there's no doubt in my mind it should still be going on today in 2006. It was so big and so over, and not only was it great with the New World Order, we also had a scenario set up to take it further. We had what you need to make the thing work. We had a babyface hero the people loved in position, which was Goldberg. All we had to do was build up bad guys, feed them to Goldberg. You had the same formula that Bruno had when it worked. You had the same formula Hogan had when it worked. You had the same formula Austin had when it worked. We had everything. There was no doubt in my mind that we should still be going. It was like, again, destiny. Or who would have thought that would have gotten out of control because Eric made some mistakes, and some other people did too. But then, who would have even thought at that time Turner would have sold all his power to not so much Time Warner, but the AOL? AOL just didn't want it.
Right.
And who would have thought that after being on TBS, one of the best rated shows for 30 years, some computer idiotic nerd jerk-offs were stupid enough to come in. I don't know why Ted would ever sell it. Not that you're stupid, Ted, but my God. And they just canceled everything. And then they had years and years and years and years of tapes that they gave to Vince for peanuts. It was the most
ridiculous,
unheard thing. And I kind of like went into shock. And then when I saw other things happen, like then Eric was replaced by some accountant who brought Russo in that thought he was going to save the day, and and
didn't Vince buy the library for like $400,000 or something?
Or $2.5 million or something. It might have been it might as well have been a penny.
Right.
I mean, you're talking 30 years of programming, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of classic, unbelievably stupid.
As a person,
who would have thought?
As a person who works at a video company, that's the most ridiculous thing I was.
It's so ridiculous you wouldn't have thought of it. You would never, when WCW was hot, how would you ever think, hey, in 2 years, AOL's going to cancel this?
Right.
It wouldn't even enter your mind.
Going back to the infancy of like Bischoff, was there a lot of jealousy like when Hogan came in? Because I heard like when Hogan left, Vince offered him like $4 million or something, but I heard Bischoff gave like $29 million that first year when they went to the 12 pay-per-views.
I wouldn't believe that. I don't know what Vince. I don't know what the deal was with Vince and Hogan. The only thing I know is this. It just kind of worked out the way it was. We had this idea with the New World Order and the invasion angle with Scott Hall. Eric had it laid out one way. It wasn't good. I changed the whole beginning and reprogrammed the whole beginning of the New World Order. I did it right there on a Monday Nitro in front of a bunch of people. And that's when we had Scott Hall come down and bust into the ring, and we did it right. But Eric would listen, so things worked out right. Hogan was in before that. If you remember, they brought Hogan in before as a good guy.
Right.
And they had ticket tape
Yeah.
and Hogan. And the bad thing with Hogan was it didn't get over.
Right.
It didn't get over.
They had Rodman in or something.
All kinds of stuff. But it just didn't get over. And then when the New World Order got hot, Hogan's the one that wanted to switch because he knew that would keep him alive.
Right.
But when they first brought Hogan in before the New World Order as a babyface, it wasn't.
Sullivan, I think, and all those guys.
And they had some stupid, but then they were going off and they started going off in these stupid directions, following what Vince was doing with these skits. Now that you mentioned that, I remember some of this nonsense, and I was fighting it. I was saying, what are you doing? I mean, Hogan comes in and they have these skits. Now, Hogan's walking around in the middle of nowhere. Remember this one? Somehow, he gets lost. He falls down a hole and winds up in a cave.
Oh,
with Prince Iakea sitting in an underground cave. He doesn't know where he is. However, the cameraman happened to be in the cave.
Sure, yeah.
That's bad stuff.
So the whole thing is so corny.
It's not even realistic.
Yeah, well, that's the point. Why are they still doing it?
Right.
They're still doing it. It's unrealistic. Yeah. It's stupid. The fans don't want to see it, so why do they keep... The biggest fight I have with TNA is the skits.
You know what I hate? It's like you watch...
We don't got any time for wrestling. Hey, cut out the skits.
Exactly.
It's like you watch Raw and like the person's like, well, we're going to do this thing, but don't tell that person. Why wouldn't they just be watching the TV? If all the... It's just...
It's stupid.
It is stupid.
I think it's lazy booking.
It's no booking, it's writing. And it's not what wrestling is. It's just different. That's why wrestling survives so long. It's a unique show. It's not a tit and ass show. It's not a soap opera. People think it's a soap opera. We got soap opera elements, but it's not a soap opera. It's an own unique fantasy show disguised as a sporting event where good battles evil. And if you don't set it up in a realistic atmosphere, there's no drama. And they just don't get it.
Since you were there, WCW had that run of 89 weeks beating Raw. Well, what do you think was the one thing that changed that momentum back to WWE or WWF at the time? What was the one? Was it then Goldberg with Nash or?
Well, it wasn't like one match that happened on TV. What happened was.
Where do you think WWE got their fire lit on their ass from the competition? They just got better.
No, they didn't get any better. The WCW the programming got killed. The New World Order was hot. The people that made it got so big and so hot, the people in control didn't know what to do. They didn't know what they had. It got beyond Eric. Eric made some mistakes with these contracts. And the guys, what we talked about before in terms of being the top guys with responsibilities, weren't responsible. They killed the program. They killed the ingredient that makes wrestling work. They killed the heat. Instead of some of these prima donnas doing what they had to do because they were making a lot of money and they were responsible, they sat home and said, hey, I have a doctor's note. My elbow's sore. Here's my contract. I'll be back in 6 months. Keep the checks coming. They could have been there. Like I said, we carried guys out of cars. These guys are sitting at home because they're pissed about something.
Right.
They got a doctor. Because the guys are hurt, so it's easy to get a doctor to say, well, yeah, the guy really shouldn't wrestle. His knee's not good. Well, we know that.
Right.
But you're making $1 million. Why don't you show up anyway? No, we're not going to show because I'm not happy. So the prima donnas, they killed the heat. In the middle of that mass confusion, they brought Russo in, and it was already the end of the days. But the whole program was killed. People are chanting Goldberg. Who's the heavyweight champion of the world? The writer!
Right. It was. Yeah.
Just kill yourself. I mean, just might as well just kill yourself. So it wasn't, believe me, Vince did not win anything. Vince didn't get any better. WCW just got bad.
Obviously, during that run, WCW had the best wrestlers in the world, especially the underneath, with the Japanese, the Lucha guys, the Benoit.
Lucha.
How important do you really think that undercard was to Nitro's success?
I think it was good. It wasn't the success. People, I hope TNA gets this. I've been trying to tell them this too. People don't pay to watch wrestling matches. People pay to watch stars. You've got to make stars. They don't give a damn if you do a Hurricane Rana or a flip out. They're flipped out. They've seen more bumps, more planned spots.
It's the same car crash every week.
Yeah, it's the same. People pay to see stars. So, what you've got to know, and that's what the system of booking and programming was. You were programmed and booked in a certain way to make you a star, not to make an exciting, fast match. Because people don't care. All they care about is the end. Are you going to motivate them to come back next month?
Right.
For a person who's been on the inside of WCW and now TNA, do you think, TNA says that their competition is WWE, do you really think that's true? And how can TNA say that they're better than WWE when WWE gets rid of somebody, TNA takes them up right away? If they're better than them, why are they taking their rejects? Not that they're rejects, but
Well, TNA is growing. So TNA needs a couple different things to get better ingrained with Spike. They need some guys. We've got a lot of great young guys that are great. Not too many people know who they are. So, guys, I mean, I'm not a big believer of taking people from Vince. They brought the Dudleys in, and that was okay. I wouldn't jump up and down, but they're okay. Angle, Angle, good, bring Angle in. You got a legitimate guy from the Olympics. I wouldn't take just everybody that, Vince is fine, but TNA, I wasn't a big fan of bringing Sting back. What are you going to do with Sting? All he does is whine and complain, and he can't do what he did. Not that he did much anyway. I mean, he was so stale, we had to lower him from the ceiling for a year and not let him talk because he was dead.
Right.
To get one match out of him. And, but anyway.
Do you think Jarrett's content with, running in the same building and that's it? I mean, do you think it'll ever come to a point where they have house shows, where they go to different parts of the country?
Oh, yeah. I mean, TNA is starting off. They can't compete with McMahon in terms of production yet.
Their production has really gotten a lot better though over the last year.
It's gotten better because they've been working on it. But it's got to go a step at a time. You got investors that already have over $20 million put in there with nothing coming back. They should be breaking even at least by now. So that might take a long. They got a lot of money invested, but you just got to go one step at a time. And TNA really doing nothing bad. They're kind of taking a step at a time, doing what they have to do. If someone like Angle, leaves, he's a good guy to take because you need some recognition to try to get some ratings now to deal with TV stations like Spike. Spike don't care if you got a bunch of new guys that are going to be great in 3 years.
Right.
Are you getting a rating this week?
Right.
So you got to, do a little of this and that. And Vince just got the only guys that have been on TV. recently. Guys my age are already gone. So you got new guys, or you got some guys Vince had for a while.
Right.
Like you said, people want to see stars. Do you think maybe a problem with TNA is that the guys are building up like Samoa Joe, maybe AJ Styles? Like these guys are great wrestlers, but they kind of they don't look like stars. Samoa Joe comes out with a baseball hat and a T-shirt. He doesn't look like the Randy Orton. He doesn't look like a Batista. The only guy I think in TNA who looks like a star would be Monty Brown. Do you think that's a problem that these guys need to start dressing and looking the part? Yeah, Samoa Joe looks like a kid. He looks like a young kid, even though he's a monster there.
Well, no, I agree with you. There's got to be some class. I watched TNA last night. Jeff Jarrett ran out at the beginning and beat up somebody. And he's got a beat-up pair of blue jeans and a T-shirt. And to me, it looked like you were watching some Mickey Mouse show and some guy in the street ran out doing this. It's not a star. It doesn't look like a star. I mean, I agree with you, but again, there's politics, and TNA isn't doing what I would do. They're doing some of it. They're doing a lot of things I wouldn't do. But there's politics involved, with that. But, so far it's going. And hopefully, I shouldn't say it isn't the wrong people, but they just brought Russo back. So,
yeah. Is it true that I would hear low-key he has a lot of heat in the locker room there? Is that true?
Low-key. I mean, I don't deal with the boys. I don't.
It's like the new thing that's out there.
Is it?
Like some of the young guys are starting to get like that big head ego. Do you see that, or I don't know if you...
Well, what? I don't deal with that end of it. I mean, I do we're doing a championship committee thing, and talk to them about some things, but mostly just involving me, so they don't make it stupid. Which they've already made it stupid, so I ended it. And I see things. I don't know what the boys. I don't hang out with them. They call me sir, and they walk away, and I'm hot because I'm not that damn old yet.
Getting back to Eric Bischoff, do you think he ever saw you as a threat since you saw him back at the time when he had no power?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Eric and me talked a lot. And then I programmed the whole thing when me and Eric worked at Match.
Right.
So I built it up. And, he listened and learned from me. Plus, Eric, I didn't want to be what Eric was. If I knew what the job was, I might have went after it more, but I didn't want to really put 20 hours a day in that kind of job. I want to golf a lot. Live happily ever after. I wish I would have done some things different than I did because of how it wound up. But I didn't think I had to, because I never thought it would have wound up canceled and got so crummy.
Huh. I guess, did you like doing commentary? I mean, you said you wanted to retire, so you didn't have to be in the ring because of politics. Did you like it?
Oh, I love doing the commentary. That's the best job outside of being a wrestling star, and that don't last forever.
Right.
But that's a great job, because in terms of television time, the 10 years in WCW between the Pro Show and the syndicated shows and the TBS, TNT, the Nitro 1 hour, I was on TV 4 or 5 times a week. I got tremendous publicity for my age, which most of my age group was gone.
Right.
Most of them. And I got a lot of publicity, and I was able to put myself in here and there just to keep it alive. And but that was the best thing. We were involved in the business. You do enough traveling to have fun, but you don't get beat up. But people don't realize what an art it is too. I mean, I had to change the character. When I started broadcasting, I was the bad guy. But you can't be a bad guy and do a good job at broadcasting because you
have to shit on everybody.
Kind of, but your job is to build that. And I slowly became a good guy. And that's why people kept chanting Larry at the end. I went full blown against the New World Order.
Right.
But you want people to listen to the commentators and not be annoyed by them. That's why Paulie could be a manager. But if Paulie is announcing, co-hosting a show for an hour, you want to turn the show off. You can't take it.
Right.
It's too annoying, and you don't put over the talent.
Did it bother you when you realized the locker room was being worked with the whole Brian Pillman, Kevin Sullivan feud? Remember that? Pillman?
I knew what was going on.
Okay, so you were going inside today. How did Eric Bischoff change with success? Did he develop an ego?
He might have developed a little ego. When you get to a position like that, there's a fine line between developing an ego and just not wanting to be bothered. I mean, if you go to TNA and you know these guys come on to their little office meeting, and you want to say hi to like Tanae, or you want to say hi to Dutch, good luck. You got by the time they walk from here to there, the guys around them, because everybody's trying to push an idea for themselves.
Right.
And you know, you get to a position like Eric or even Vince or some other guys, where it's not so much that you get a horrible ego, but it's just you have no life. So you kind of like, hey, look, I just can't talk to you now. I gotta go. I'm gonna be. People go, oh, what an egotistical bastard, but they just don't have the time. Cut me a break, or
right.
Yeah, I know what you're doing. You're trying to push yourself, and not now.
Right.
You know, kind of thing. So Eric wasn't a bad guy. He didn't really become an egotistical guy, but he became more aloof. But it was probably a combination of everything.
What are your thoughts on the whole public Bischoff and Flair feud? Do you think that Flair should have just accepted his role and stepped aside?
I think Flair should have retired about 10, 15 years ago. I don't understand why WCW kept... My God, I mean, they were pushing Flair throughout the 90s. He was already so overused. And I couldn't figure it out. I could not figure it out. I cannot figure it out to this day. You know, I know he owes the IRS billions of dollars and, you know, the idiot needs money. But he's still doing the same thing today he was doing 20 years ago or through the whole 90s. It's like Flair is going to be one of these guys that I guess is going to drop dead in the ring because he will never, ever quit. I just can't figure out why promoters still... Oh, it's Ric Flair. That guy's 90. It's okay, it's Ric Flair.
Right.
He's dead. It's all right. Wheel Flair's body out, and he's going to be dead. They'll probably still have a match.
Right.
I don't get it.
What do you think about Flair now doing like the hardcore matches, like rolling through the thumbtacks and all that?
I was horrified. When ECW came on, I figured out I got to try something to, you know, compete with TNA or something. I was so horrified by this stupidity. I clicked it on once. The Sandman was with some fat guy in a G-string.
Right.
I went, well, this ain't going anywhere. Now, I guess from what I hear, the bottom's falling out. It ain't going anywhere. But then I clicked it again, and now here's ECW. I don't know what that has to do with Flair. You think if you'd use the guy, make him a front man, go see Flair on the ticket sales, manager, something, but you know.
Right.
And then I see the Big Show and Flair, and he's beating the crap out of him, and Flair's bloody, and then he's falling into... Then the idiot... The idiot gets up, he's got thumbtacks sticking out of his kneecaps.
I heard he did like a baseball slide.
He did!
Yeah,
He lost his mind. To tell you the truth, I don't care if I needed money or not. I mean, like, you've been on TV long, get a job someplace. If McMahon told me, you know, well, yeah, I mean, I think he owes McMahon a lot of money so he wouldn't go to jail with the IRS. But if McMahon told me, look, if you're going to hit the Big Show, I want you to do a swan dive into 3,000 thumbtacks. I'd say, Vince, kiss my ass, and I know why I never worked for him. I'm going to go get a job selling cars. I'd rather do that than fall, you know.
Do you think Vince deep down likes telling Ric Flair to do thumbtack matches and stuff like that?
He lives for that. Vince lives for that. You know, that goes back to the days of Backlund. Did people want Backlund to be the champion? No. The WWF was on the verge of bankruptcy. Junior wanted it. Do people want to see what WWE is doing now? No, it's just the only game in town, so you're going to watch it. It's just, and that's how Vince is. Vince is going to push who he wants, and he don't care what the fans want.
Going back to like the Monday Night War with Bischoff and all that, do you think that was kind of like cheap heat when he was like challenging Vince to fights and then giving out the finishes to the matches on TV? Was there ever a point did you go, this is too much, or did you think deep down it was good? Or
my thought on it, I'm very professional. I'm for business. The thing that made, you know, WCW real hot, and it was the fact there was a war going on. And I thought the war was great. But there's still a code, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, to stoop to the point of exposing, you know, that's because they were doing like one taped and one... I don't know. Well, I guess, but see, McMahon was doing cool stuff too. They had like the DX blow up the CNN center.
yeah.
You know, I mean, sometimes McMahon did some cool stuff and we did cool, but that's what made everybody hot, was the war. The best thing for TNA, and it'll probably get there as long as things go the way they go and they keep going, it would be, head up Monday nights. And I think that, we're going prime time, and that should be the next step. We'll see what happens.
Do you think that Bret Hart didn't fit into WCW? Do you think he didn't fit in there? Or
No,
do you think
he
they
didn't
just didn't? Right.
Bret Hart, he...
Or did they just misuse him there?
Well, they didn't misuse him. I don't know. Now, see, I'll probably get in trouble for this, or heat or something. I like Bret Hart. I never saw the superstar in Bret Hart. To me, he wasn't a Goldberg, he wasn't a Rock, he wasn't an Austin, he wasn't a Hogan. He was as great as the Hart Foundation tag team guy.
Right.
He was a good technician, but technicians don't draw money. Bret's interviews were the same. He was very monotone. I'm the best there ever was, there ever will be. Next. I mean, he was very good. He was a solid worker, but I don't get the whole Bret Hart stardom thing. And if I was a promoter, I'd just leave Bret homeless.
Do you think he was
tag team with the Anvil or something? I don't know.
Do you think he's looked at as being a legend like that just because business is big in Canada and he represents that country? And
well, Canada is the hype. He's from Canada. I think his claim to fame is the fact that Vince gave him the screw job. I think that was his big claim to fame. He got the screw job, which happened more in the old days than you thought. He went back and popped him in the face, and that was Bret Hart. But in terms of drawing money, WCW brought him in, paid him a bunch of money, and it didn't draw a dilly.
Maybe that whole screw job was a shooter work.
I'm not sure, but
it's great that other people still talk about it.
I would not be surprised if it was real, because Vince don't care about Bret Hart. I'm not sure what the story was, but Vince cares about his business. So if he thought that whatever he did was best, for his business, he would do it.
Were you there when Orndorff and Vader had the fist fight?
No, I missed that.
Okay.
Damn it. I always miss the good stuff. I was there when Maeva slapped the hell out of Putski. No one would save him. We kept going, should we stop this? Nah.
What happened with
I missed the Orndorff Vader thing.
Yeah, what other locker room
What
fights
happened with the Maivia thing?
Is Maivia? No, he's dead. Okay. Putski was not the smoothest guy you'd run into. And Maeva at the time was driving around with like a little, young blonde friend. And Putski made the mistake of shooting his mouth off to Rocky Johnson and his wife, whose wife happened to be Peter's daughter, who happened to tell Peter's wife, her mother, and when Maivia got the heat for finding out that Putski stooged off his girlfriend, Maivia wanted to kill him. Actually, Maivia wanted to kill Rocky, too, for a long time. The Rock was almost not born.
Who in that WWF era back then in the late 70s, 80s, who was the locker room troublemaker that nobody respected?
Troublemaker?
Is it true Lou Albano would get fired every TV?
No, he got fired every week. There really wasn't any troublemakers, for the boys. There really wasn't any troublemakers. I mean, I don't know what you mean by troublemakers.
Like somebody who wasn't respected or shot his mouth off and...
Not really. You mean the guys that were kind of like goofs.
Right.
Guys like Putski was kind of a goof. I mean, one time we're sitting there playing poker. Most guys are really cool. We had a great time. And if some guy was a goof, we would cut him off. So he wouldn't bother us. And the goofs weren't the tough guys. Right. Thank God.
See, it's like you always want to know now because now you have the internet, so you always know what's going on behind the scenes. It's like it was a mystery then.
And back then, it was a machine. You knew what your place was. Bruno was here, and everybody else had their place. You knew what it was, so there was no jealousy. And there was no it wasn't like one guy's got a contract for $10 million and you're making $100, so there wasn't that big. The top guys were making more. Everybody was making a pretty good living.
Do you think with the younger guys, do you think that they don't protect the business, and that's one thing that really hurts the business?
Well,
Or do you think it's just evolved? Everybody knows what it's all about.
you know what? The business has been so exposed, what you would translate into the word hurt, that you can't expose it anymore. But even when wrestling, 20, 30, 40 years ago, when people would go nuts, if you took someone aside and said, hey, look at this is real, they'd say, well, is it real?
Right.
But it was real to them for that hour. It was their fantasy. It was their getaway. It was their weekly television show where they could release their stuff, and they didn't want to know. And I just don't think the guys of today have any idea what to do because there's no one there to teach them or show them, and it's hard to understand what they're not doing when there's no way they can relate to what happens if they did do it because the audience is different. Even if they did today what we did 30 years ago, the audience reaction wouldn't be the same. So, but I'm still sticking to my guns. The more you kayfabe the audience, the more they're going to get into it because it's human nature. You have to let the imagination grow. People will imagine more shit than you can write. That's why you don't need writers. People will imagine what's going on behind those closed doors and make a big deal out of it. If you show them a skit where they see what's going on behind closed doors, two idiots trying to talk to each other badly, it blows their whole imagination. So now they got nothing to get emotional about, nothing to use their imagination for, and nothing to wonder about.
I think again, Crockett used to do that good. Like they'd have like Wyndham and the Horseman jump Dusty behind the door. He'd come out. You always think what happened behind the scene. Now it's like the camera runs everywhere.
Well, it's stupid. It's stupid. Yeah. I mean, when you click the Vinces, there's two married women pretending they're lesbians, sitting in a motel room ready to make out, but they don't see the camera crew. Right. It just happens to be in the motel room.
That's stupid.
It's so stupid. It's so stupid. The only good thing about it is it's been so stupid and so the way it is, it would be so different if you went back to the old psychology. You couldn't do it like that, but there's a lot you could do that would make the show much more entertaining to watch.
When Russo came over to WCW, do you think he was just in over his head?
Well, you know what? I didn't know if Russo was in over his head. I just knew everything we worked for was getting killed.
Right.
I don't think Russo was in over his head because he was one of the guys that kind of formulated this system of writing, which is adopted today. What TNA and McMahon does is basically fill in the blanks of their formats, which are the same as they've been 10 years. Now they got, do an entrance, do a skit, do this in the ring, and they just fill in different blanks, but it's the same format. Russo wasn't over his head. He just doesn't know. He didn't know. I mean, I think he's a smarter guy now than he was, 10 years ago. But he still don't know.
When they brought you back to wrestle Scott Hall, did things get personal ever between you guys?
No, not really. No. I almost slapped him one night, but it had nothing to do with the red. It had to do with poor Louis Spicoli.
What was that?
And Scott being, schnockered. Huh. Oh, Scott was upset. I did it. I was going to wrestle Louis Spicoli.
Right, I remember
the Scott Hall thing. And it didn't happen because Louis died a week before, and then of course I was announcing on Nitro, and we're doing the broadcast, and Shivani said something to me about Louis Spicoli, and just as I was about to say something, which was very nice, the director came in the headsets and started saying, "Don't say anything about Louis Spicoli and the family and the death," because they didn't want certain things to be said because it was a bad death. It was an OD.
Right.
It wasn't like the poor guy got in a wreck.
Right.
OD.
Right.
And Turner didn't want, So as this guy's yelling at my ear not to say nothing, I didn't know what to say. I said, well, out of respect for everybody, I just won't say anything.
Right.
And poor Scott was all upset about, Louis dying, so he comes down drunk one time to the bar. And I rarely go to bars.
Right.
I'm the only guy that don't drink. So I'm sitting there talking to a couple people, and old Scott is schnocker. He's wasted. And he comes over, and he's starting to say something. And I'm kind of ignoring him. And then now he's asking for it. He went over the line, and then he starts pushing it. And he's got a bottle in his hand, and he's drunk. And I let it go because I like Scott. And all of a sudden, something happened. He pushed the wrong button.
Right.
And I was gonna snatch him. And something happened in my eyes because I changed. And all of a sudden, Arn jumped up and grabbed Scott and just took him away because he knew he was about to get killed.
Huh.
But it wasn't nothing. It was just a bad night for Scott. But nothing ever personal in the ring because they know I'd kill him.
Right. Memories about your series with Kurt Hennig. Oh, you know what? Backtrack real quick. You touched a little bit on Tony Schiavone. You worked with him. Was Tony Schiavone good to work with? A lot of people told me that he was pretty much a dick.
I heard he had a lot of heat with a lot of the wrestlers. Like he big leagued some of the younger guys.
Well, Tony did what he was told to do.
Right.
And I mean, he was very professional. He worked hard, but whatever they told him to say. And a lot of times, as we're broadcasting, there's people in there coming in your ear, saying this and that. And but Tony was real easy to work with. He was a great announcer. I mean, I would get heat too, but it wasn't. I mean, not like with. I'll tell you some heat. It wasn't really heat. I go to the catering one time, right? And I'm sitting there eating, and Benoit comes over, and Eddie Guerrero comes over, and Perry Saturn comes over, and a couple other of the younger guys who wanted to break.
Right.
But they're all like 5'8".
Huh.
And they all come over and sit down next to me, and I'm looking at them, I'm going, well, thanks for letting me eat first before, you gang me up here.
Huh.
So they wanted to have a talk because Benoit was upset because of something I said in the broadcast. I says, well, what are you talking about, Chris? Well, I was wrestling this guy, and you kind of made it sound like I was a small guy. So I says, Chris, you're wrestling. I mean, this might be the wrong guy, but it's the ring. I mean, you're wrestling Sid Vicious. The guy is 6'7". You're this tall.
Right.
The guy in the truck is telling me, oh my God, talk about the size difference. And, oh God, look at the difference here. Sid. I mean,
Right.
What do you want me to say? I can't.
Right.
You can't please everybody when you're in that. I'm going to say, hey, Benoit's just as tall as Sid Vicious.
Huh.
But, so some guys would get heat just for saying things, but if you look at the reality, some of the guys, too, they want you to put them over when sometimes, you can't put them over because the truck's telling you to put this guy over.
When you're doing a play-by-play, how much are they telling you to say through the headsets? Is it a lot? And do you think maybe they should just leave you alone and let you call the match?
Well, most of the time they leave you alone. I mean, it's rare you hear something.
Oh, okay.
I mean, yeah, it's rare. And normally, I mean, I was doing the color. I was an ad-lib guy. The most guy that you'd hear we talking would be the play-by-play guy, And a lot of time cues. You got 30 seconds left. Make sure you plug Snickers or some shit,
right.
Which wouldn't, involve me.
Who did you look at as announcers, or who did you model yourself, or who did you try to learn from when you started out doing it?
Well, you know what? I didn't model myself.
And who did you think was the best announcer from back in the day? Who's your favorite?
Well, let me tell you, I never paid attention to announcers. When I was wrestling, I was into the wrestling thing. It's kind of an interesting story now that you brought this up. When they first asked me to do the broadcasting, I was kind of ticked off. I was almost kind of insulted. To me, being a broadcaster, I didn't realize how important it was. It is very important to get stuff over. And you really have to have a talent for it. Some guys can do great interviews, can't broadcast to save their life. But at first, I never listened to any announcer because I didn't think about it. I didn't take it serious. It had nothing to do with being a wrestling star as far as I was concerned. I got kind of into it because at that time Bill Watts came in, and he had this new idea he was selling TBS on, where everybody over 40 was old news, not worth a damn except Flair.
Right.
So we're going to push all the young guys. And what that meant was he's pushing Eric Watts. That was all the young guys.
Right.
And then when I saw Eric Watts get in the ring, trip over his own feet, and beat Arn Anderson, I said, "Well, I quit. Goodbye. You're not killing me, goofy Bill Watts again."
Huh.
So anyway, but at that time, I decided to take advantage of their comp and my insurance. So I had one of my knees like scoped out. It's a good excuse.
All right.
Scope a knee scope, knee scope. So I'm sitting around for a couple of months getting paid. So I get a call from somebody. I don't know what happened. If Jesse left or something happened. They wanted. Well, you're sitting around getting paid. You mind doing something? Like maybe we need a guy to do some broadcasting. This whatever happened.
Right.
So I said okay. So I drive down and I sat down. I don't know if it was with Gordon Soley or Shivani, maybe Jim Ross. I can't remember. And I'm doing the color. And the next day I get a call. Jesus Christ, that was the best color commentating we've ever heard. And at that time, there was kind of a choice between me and Jesse.
Right.
And they wanted me to do it. And but I was kind of insulted. I said, hey, I saw Nache Stadium, a wrestling star. If you guys did this right, don't listen to Bill Watts. Start drawing money till you're 35, 40 years old. And so I was kind of like insulted. But then, I was 40 years old at the time, but the way things were booked, they weren't right. They were killing it. And but then it was weird. And the more you said you didn't want to do something, the more they were insistent. So I said, look, I don't know about doing the color. And then right away, whoever it was at the time, well, we'll pay you this.
Right.
And then we'll make you an employee and give you all the benefits and pay you this. For what? For that? For broadcasting? So I figured it was a good time with the politics and the age to step out. Because I could always go back in, but you don't want to get burned out. You don't want to get hurt. I don't want to get lost in the politics.
Right.
Here I am. My life is to put over Eric Watts and Dustin Rhodes because their father. So I took him up on it, and it was I made more money doing the damn broadcasting than I ever did wrestling in all those years. It was a great deal. And then I wound up doing before Nitro, doing all the post work, except for maybe the one center stage on and off. So it was like I worked a day a week, made more money than ever, had all the benefits.
Right.
Lived on the golf course for 10 years, and now I'm spoiled rotten.
Can't beat that.
No.
They also brought you back to work a little program with Kurt Hennig, and you guys did the Old Age Outlaws.
We did?
I think you guys did some skit, the Old Age Outlaws.
Old age. Wouldn't Kurt Hennig, wasn't he
No,
singing
he was
about
doing
I
the,
hate rap?
yeah, he was doing the country
yeah.
guy.
Rap is crap.
Yeah.
I know I did something with Regal. I liked Regal.
Yeah.
And in the mid-90s, mid-90s, when I was doing the broadcasting, and Regal was there, and they had no idea what to do with this guy. At first, he was like a baby face from England. Who cares?
Right.
But he put that lip up and put on that He was great. I mean, talk about a guy. I mean, and all these people who think they're smarks and they know it all. In the mid '80s, especially, everything's exposed. Everybody thinks they know it all. And here's Regal. He can strut out there, do his wrestling holds, and people hated his guts. He was like me the other day. He just stood there and got heat. And I saw that, and no one else knew what to do with him. So I said, look, I'm going to work the same thing I did with Bruno. Only I'm the retired commentator this time. So we just did a thing where I said, I'll do something with Regal. There was too much heat to waste. So I did a thing, where I was interviewing him, and then he pissed me off, so I left, and he got insulted, and I got insulted, and then it led to this match where we did like a 25-minute thing on TBS, which Brian Pillman was running around for 2 weeks. Oh my God, they went 25 minutes and they didn't even throw one clothesline. That was a clinic. Well, I could do it with Regal because Regal was good. He knew all the wrestling stuff.
Right.
So we had one of the best matches TBS ever put on. And we programmed it. The ratings went up in like end of May, which was the hardest sweep to get in the summer. And, that was great. I loved doing the stuff at Regal. Then I went back to the broadcasting. So about every, 2 or 3 years when the time was right, I'd come out, but that would keep your name big. You get the publicity from this, then you do this. And
What do you remember about the last Nitro before it happened? And How shocked were you when you heard the news that Vince bought it?
Well, you know what? When me and Bobby Heenan, maybe 6 months before the last Nitro and all that,
Right.
we left. They called us in. I think Bobby had 2 or 3 months left on his contract, and I had 4 or 5 months left on my contract. And some guys called us up, and they basically said, "Look, we're going to do this when your contracts are up." And they were kind of kayfabing that they were canceling everything, and Bobby got pissed. And so they paid Bobby off, and Bobby still had like 2 or 3 months to go, but he wouldn't go back
Right.
and do it. He just quit, took the money and quit.
Huh.
I said, "Well, look, I tell you what, I got so much. You give me the money, I'll finish up. But then I'm quitting early. They give me that option."
Right.
And so 6 months before my contract was even up, I got paid and I was gone. And I didn't want to hang around because it was painful. It was pain. It was the time when David Arquette was the champion and Russo was the champion and making Goldberg look like a moron. I mean, they just killed it. And then by the time the Vince thing and they had meetings at this power plant and shit, I wasn't even there.
Okay.
Well, we did the shoot interview with Russo. We were like, "How could you put David Arquette as a champion?" He goes, "Well, I think it was great. When has WCW ever been on the cover of USA Today with Arquette?" And I'm sitting there going,
But that's how they thought. Dave Arquette's on the cover, but our show's canceled.
Yeah. Right.
So good go.
And what wrestling fans that are David Arquette's or non-wrestling fans are going to start watching wrestling?
I didn't know who the hell David Arquette is.
I think it was the first time I ever argued with somebody on a shoot interview.
Yeah.
And
I
that
couldn't
movie
believe it.
they made, I tried to fight that. How stupid. I mean, they made a lot of mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
Ready to Rumble. Now, wouldn't you think if you had a movie about, you had a Hot Show Nitro, you would call the movie maybe Monday Nitro and make it about Nitro?
Right.
Instead, they go, "Let's call it Ready to Rumble. That means we got to give a boxing announcer $100,000 to use Ready to Rumble because he says it on a boxing show. But we'll make a wrestling movie with some guy 3 foot tall. Let's give him the." I just wanted to kill him. It was just time. I golf so good. I played on senior pro. I had a good old. I just couldn't take it anymore. Wrestling was banned from my house.
Did you ever try to bury any of your heat with you and Vince or no?
No.
Were you shocked that he made that comment, I guess, after WCW was bought by him on his TV about
What
you?
comment?
He said something about you. I think it was like...
Vince said something about me?
I'm almost positive.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I'm sure someone would have told me if he did. I don't think he would. If he did, I would have known. Why? What was he supposed to say?
I forgot, to be honest with you.
Wasn't it kind of when they bought WCW and it was like a thumbs up, thumbs down, maybe, and when they were putting over all the talent that might come in as I think it did.
For them?
Yeah, and there wasn't like Jarrett got booed or I don't know, but that month they were doing all this.
Yeah, see, I didn't even watch.
What did you expect after the sale? Did you think they were going to use the WCW guys better, or did you just know?
No, I knew they'd kill it.
Right.
I knew it would die. I knew what they were doing because they didn't buy WCW. I mean, they bought the name and the taste, but then they tried to pull it off, but they didn't get the right guys.
Right. They should have went after the main.
Yeah, so I said, "Oh, they're going to kill that too," and they did.
Huh. I guess what happened in 2001 when he sued WWE?
Well, it was just a thing. You know what? I really can't.
Right.
Because it's I really can't talk about it.
Okay, that's
legally
okay.
with it being over now.
Okay.
So.
What was it like to work with Bruno Sammartino? I guess it was at the Legends show a couple years back.
Well, it was interesting. It was good. It was good to have Bruno there because for years, Bruno. People say he got bitter, and he really didn't get bitter. He didn't get bitter about the fans or bitter about the boys. He got some bitter towards some of the promoters that did a lot of things and that he didn't believe in. Plus, take advantage of a lot of the guys. Like I said, Bruno used to stick up for the guys a lot. Because he knew what the promoters would do to him. Just like Cactus Jack is lucky he can still walk.
Mm-hmm.
But diving off cages, he made a name for himself. But if he would have, one more little inch here and there, the guy could have been crippled forever. You think Vince would have cared, or the promoters would have cared? No.
Right.
I mean, they'll use you like that, and that's the kind of stuff. But Bruno, it was a combination of being upset about how the business went, to feeling funny about being in front of a crowd that was now wise to everything because he spent a lifetime going out of his way to keep them unwise. And he didn't know what to expect because he figured when he went out, people would say, "Oh, in them days, it was But I'm glad he did it, and it was good to see because when he went out, the place went nuts. And the place, they went so nuts that Bruno popped like he did the old day. He come running in the ring with me and his tongue's out and he's going berserk. After, I heard he was bitching for hours about, I'm not doing anything because he doesn't want to get hurt. He had back surgery. Right. But he walked out there and the place popped and Bruno went nuts. And then back there, and then I heard he was back there jumping up and down, going, "I'm glad I did this." But he realized he was afraid to go out because it meant a lot to him to do what he believed in because it was right for the business at the time, and he felt funny. It would be like having your kid, and you go up for, little kids saying, "Santa Claus is coming, Santa Claus is coming, Santa Claus is coming." And then one year you go out and the kid's in front of the TV and you're going out putting gifts down. Like, "Daddy, there's no Santa Claus? It's you?" It's that kind of.
Right.
But I'm glad he did. Was he realizes that, what? I think people are so smart now that they're sorry they're smart.
Did you have heat with Bruno at one time for a period of time?
No.
What was that all about?
It was just kind of. It was just a combination of him being a very stubborn, and me kind of becoming a big name at the time and not doing the respectful thing that he thought I should have done, and I didn't because I was me and didn't think I should. Kind of hard to explain. It's more of a respect, kind of thing. And then there was a lot of rumors of where he thought maybe I was more animate because I never was back in the WWF or the WWF, and word got back that I made some comments about, well, I was never back because of the old man, when Bruno thought it meant him, but we always called Vince Sr. the old man. Because if you said Vince, both Vinces turned around. So
right.
You said we called Vince Sr. the old man or Vince, and then we called Junior Junior.
Right.
So Vince Sr. wouldn't turn around. So there was just some things, but then, it's just Italians.
Right. Squashed? All the heat squashed?
No.
Still a little there. How did you end up in TNA?
I think they just kept firing everybody else, and I was cheap.
Right.
How did I wind up in TNA? Let me try to remember. I got a call, beginning of TNA, I got a call. They wanted me to go up and get involved with AJ Styles. Something to do with like a manager-mentor thing.
Right.
So I wound up having a match or a couple of matches with AJ, and then something changed where they decided not to do that. And then they wouldn't call like for a few months. Then they'd call me back, and then I'd did something for a few weeks with someone else, and they had some ideas. And then that changed, so they didn't call me again. Then they came to Florida, and they called me again. And I went down, and I think I was like going to be one of the part of the championship committee. They were going to have a few guys on the championship committee, and I was one of them, and every week someone else. Well, that didn't work out. Terry Funk wanted too much money, and this guy wanted too much money, and I was local. And I said, look, I know you guys are new. I said, I'll work with you. I'll charge a whole bunch, and we'll see what happens. And then Dusty, came in, and he had the book for a while, and then I wasn't there for 6 months. Because Dusty was pushing himself in Dustin. Something new. Then they fired Dusty, so then they called me back to kind of like fill in for the committee thing that Dusty left vacant.
Right.
So it's been kind of a back and forth. I try to help them. They go a different way. Okay. Then they need something, so I come back and help you. Okay. So it's been, just kind of on and off helping him because I was one of the guys available that wouldn't try to give him the shaft. I mean, just some of these guys, I think we're just trying to take too much money out of him. We're just trying to get off the ground, and I want him to get off the ground.
Right.
So I was, I was the guy that would work with him.
Do you think TNA, I mean, what are they in their 4th, 5th year? Do you think that they're learning from their mistakes, or do you think they're still making the same mistakes? Or do you actually see them evolving, improvement, and all that?
Well, I see them improving. They made some mistakes. They're still making some mistakes, but they're doing a lot of good stuff too. And even some of the stuff they get criticized for isn't all their fault because, in terms of the show, they don't have a lot of time to work with. You try to build up things for a pay-per-view, you got 42 minutes. So, they need a little longer show. Overall, I think they're doing, pretty good, considering everything. And, hopefully it's going to get, better and better. And we'll see what happens.
If you could change one aspect of the company, if you were in charge, what would you do? Or what's the one glaring thing you think in your mind that you see every week of TV and go, this has got to change?
I don't know if I should tell you. Because there's definitely some things I would change.
What about Jeff Jarrett still being on top?
Well, Jeff Jarrett gets a bad rap because people know he's kind of involved in it, even though he's not the money guy.
Right.
So he doesn't have the final say.
Right.
But yeah, Jeff's a very good worker. He's very good, and he gets criticized a lot. But because we got so many young guys, it's really hard to say, oh, Jeff Jarrett shouldn't have the belt. Well, great. Who are you going to put it on? Who's going to carry it? Who can work? Who can talk? Who's been around long enough to have enough finesse? So, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I don't even know if Jeff wants to do what Jeff is doing, but then there's always that, okay, well then who?
Right.
And so you got to have somebody ready. So I think Jeff's very good. I think maybe he's getting a little bit of rap he don't deserve, only because what are you going to do to make the Smarks happy? You're going to just put the belt on someone that's not ready yet?
Right, exactly.
So,
As far as AJ, what are your thoughts on AJ as a worker?
Oh, well, the word worker is lost.
Right.
As a talent, I think AJ is great. I mean, in the ring, AJ is phenomenal. But then, AJ, along with Daniels, along with Sabin, along with Sanjay Dutt, you can put a whole group of guys in that cluster of guys that are very, very good at what they do. And unfortunately, what that cluster does, it makes everybody in that group the same as everybody else in that group. It's hard to make a star if there's so many of one guy.
Do you think a lot of these guys are just spot monkeys in a way and they can't really work? Without saying names.
Most of them.
Right.
And, that's what they're trained to do. They don't know what the word work means. There's no one to really teach them what a work is, and then you got a cluster combined with, even the WWE, they got a plethora of agents. They got agents that can work.
Right.
And there's a couple of reasons where the agents can't translate working to the new talent, and one of it is the belief that there's got to be so much action or people are going to click, which is bullshit. Because if you're a wrestling fan, you're going to watch wrestling. What are you going to click to? Law and Order? If the guy's not taking enough bumps, you're watching wrestling. The other thing is time limits on TV. Again, we got 42 minutes. For some reason, everybody's match is so quick. You can't work like work should be in 5 minutes.
I said that on TNA. You watch it and the show's like, too quick.
It's so quick, you don't
Nothing registers.
remember anybody.
I don't remember anything the next day.
It's hard to make a star. You don't remember what happened. All you remember vaguely is bodies flying. You don't know if it's AJ or Sabin or Sanjay or ABC or...
Right.
You don't know who the hell I got. Someone was flying through the air good.
Think the business will ever go back?
Back?
or be slowed down?
It's got to be slowed down. It's got to be slowed down to make some of these guys stars. Our show and matches are very fast. Vince has some too. At least he's got more time to work with. But if you look at how he made some stars, the guys that were good enough, The Rock, the Austin, these guys weren't rushed, but they were guys that were good enough to go out there and carry a long interview, and go out there and work a match. So it's a combination of having guys that can do it and promoters that know how to program. And you got a combination now of no one that knows how to work and promoters that don't know how to program.
Do you think that like TNA, like they innovated actually it started in Japan, but like the 6-sided ring? Do you think maybe they're trying too hard and maybe they should just go to the simpler, back to the basics things? Because it looks like a lot of the veterans and guys that come over, that's hard to work in that ring if you're not used to it. It probably takes some adjustment.
You know what? It's weird. When you're in the ring, you don't notice it.
Really?
Outside the ring, you look at it, it looks different.
Mm.
I'm probably getting used to it now. But when I get in the ring, you don't notice the 6 sides. Probably because everything's opposite.
Right.
So if you hit a rope, opposite's a rope. If you're standing here, you look opposite. So you got the feeling of opposites, even though there's 2 extra ones. I don't notice much of a difference in the ring. And, I don't think the ring's a bad idea. I mean, it's different. It's something different. You got the TNA,
Do you think they should just maybe use it for a novelty, like a gimmick, and maybe make it special? And not...
Well, maybe not now. TNA's already kind of got that thing. But
right.
Again, people are looking at things that aren't important. People ain't going to buy money to see the ring. They're going to buy, pay money to see stars. And you can make a star in an octagon or a 6-sided ring or a square ring. It doesn't matter. It's not what makes stars. It's just giving them a little different look. Nothing wrong with it. I don't think.
I guess, do you think there comes a point in time when someone has made like such a good living off the business should give back by putting, the younger guys over?
Well, that's the whole responsibility.
Right.
It's the law of nature. It's the same thing a family does. Parents work and slave to raise their kids till they die, for the simple reason that their kids can grow up and work and slave and raise their kids till they die.
Right.
And that's how the world works. And business and wrestling's the same thing. And that was one of WCW's problems. That you got a bunch of guys who became big stars that wouldn't show up, that wouldn't do this, that wouldn't do that, and yeah, you definitely have a responsibility of giving back, to what you take.
Who do you prefer to work with, like on shows these days? If you were to work a show, vets or the new young guys?
Well, I prefer the vets.
All right.
Because that way. It's going to be real slow.
Right. You think TNA has a future?
Yep. I think they do. I hope I'm right. I think they do. The only reason they wouldn't have a future right now is if Panda just for some reason said, no more. But I just don't see them doing it. The Carters are really cool people. Dixie's very sharp. Bob's a great guy. Plus, they've got a lot of money invested. So.
Right.
And they're this close, so I think they'll do okay. I really like the Carters, and they've been behind it, and I don't see them going anywhere.
What's the biggest piece of advice you can give for a success in this business?
Damn. In my rightful mind, unless you're really a freak of nature, or it's an impossible question. It's hard to look at a bunch of new guys and say, "Hey, in 10 years you're going to be like Austin, and you're going to be like Goldberg, or you're going to be able to talk like The Rock." So you've got to try. But this business has gotten so ridiculously hard for guys to come in, learn, get a spot, and make money that I would not recommend it to anybody.
Right.
I would You know, I mean, it's just hard. I mean, I see so many guys get crippled and hurt for no money, and I know that unless you're one of 1 in 10 million, you ain't gonna make it.
Whose idea was it to feud you with Raven in TNA?
I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I think it was to the point where Raven is just kind of a crybaby whiner. No one else wanted to get involved, and I was the idiot.
I guess what makes someone a good worker in your eyes?
Okay. A good worker is somebody, it's got nothing to do with bumps or moves or wrestling. It's somebody who can get the people to love them or hate them. That's a good worker. And the only way you're going to get people, the audience, to love you or hate you, if they don't, then in the middle they don't care. They got to love you or they got to hate you. And the only way you're going to become a good worker to do that is you're going to be able to give the people something to believe in. So you're going to have to believe in believability. You're going to only become a good worker if you believe in kayfabe, if you believe in unsmartening, if you believe in making it look and the programming like it's real. Now, too many of these guys, they'll spend hours going over spots. Instead of saying to themselves, okay, I'm this guy. What if this was real? What would happen? Would I run out there and dance around like a chicken?
Right.
No. If you did this to me, I'd beat the shit out of you. So if you don't look at it like it's real and don't put it together like it's real, you'll never be a good worker. Because people will not love you or will not hate you. They just don't care.
If you could put together a DVD of your 3 greatest matches, what would they be?
I did put together a DVD. I think it's on my website, but I don't do computers, so I don't know what you guys do. Well, the 3 great, you know what? You can break it down to probably eras. I mean, the Bruno feud was the best. The Shea Stadium was the historical classic. And that has to be number 1. The stuff I did with the evil Lord Regal was a wrestling clinic in the days when it was already, getting to be a lost art. And the matches I had with Regal would have to be out there, which they are. And then the very end of what I would consider my active wrestling career would be the Eric Bischoff, Scott Hall matches with WCW, where I fought for Nitro against the New World Order. Those would be the 3.
Actually, if you think about it,
classics.
You're one of the only wrestlers that's in 3 generations main eventing.
Yeah.
I can't, because look, Dusty really, he's a novelty now, kind of. He really isn't, you wrestle more than he does now, so I can't think of too many.
What do you think? Flair, I mean,
Flair, I guess, yeah.
There's
not too.
Well, I'm kind of like, I kept myself on TV through the broadcasting for 10 years, and most of my generation's gone. And also because I broadcasted so much, I saved my body a lot. I didn't get hurt. I didn't keep wrestling. I didn't want to, overdo it. Plus, the things they were doing, they were brutal. They weren't wrestling anymore. They were, bumping off and smashing through tables. And, it just seems silly because if you go through so much trouble to make people realize it's not real, why would you do these things to kill yourself that no one will ever believe?
I just like the whole thing is like, you see Terry Funk like in Amarillo or something.
He's absolutely insane.
He falls through a table with the ringside with the guys announcing. Now you watch ECW, the guy comes down and piles 10 tables right there. Oh, let's pick up a table for no reason and just...
And
it's not realistic.
Lay there for 2 minutes while I adjust all these tables.
It's not realistic.
Hey, 20-some years ago, you know how the guys, they spring on the ropes or they crawl up and then do a moonsault. It's not that we couldn't do that 20 years ago. We had the athletic ability, but it would kill the whole illusion because if it was real, what idiot would stand there for 10 seconds like this while the other guy would balance himself on the top rope ready to dive into him? It would have killed the show.
It also shortens careers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever happened to Dusty's TCW? It never worked out. It only lasted.
Well, I don't know. It was probably the same situation.
Financial.
It was just
All right.
Dusty. I don't know what his money thing is, but it's just hard to draw people, especially in the days they were doing. You got to remember, though, the World Trade Centers got
Right.
killed. So for about 2 years, the economy, it still sucks.
Right.
They'll have you think the economy's better. People are jumping up and down now. Oh, it's getting better. The gas is down to $2.40 a gallon.
All right.
Hey, a year and a half ago it was $1 a gallon.
Yeah.
They're still screwing the hell out of you. They
Right.
just put it to 3 something, so you're really happy when it's only $2.50.
Huh.
But back then, after the World Trade Centers collapsed, people were afraid to go out. Money was tight. They were afraid to get in groups. I didn't do much because flying around
Right.
with all these indies, and so it probably had a lot to do with the economy too.
I guess. You have any regrets?
Yeah, there are a couple regrets. I got a couple regrets. I regret I didn't go out of my way to take over more of WCW. I think even AOL, as stupid as they were, if WCW would have been in better shape at that time, because we were bringing in $400 million for a year or two, plus providing programming. Not only did we make $400 million, we provided TNT and TBS with hours of programming, which,
Right.
made them a profit instead of them dishing out money. I'm just kind of bitter. I should have got more involved in the booking of WCW, and instead of being helpless when it was already. When I saw it going, I couldn't do anything.
Right.
Did you ever meet Ted Turner, and how much did he really grasp about the ins and outs of the professional wrestling?
Oh yeah, I
business?
met Ted a few times. I like Ted. Ted's a hell of a guy.
Is he a mark?
If I ever meet him, I'm going to ask him why he sold out
Right.
again. But he was a big wrestling fan. He loved it. That's why it was on TBS, that long. In fact, Ted was loyal to it because not only was he a fan, he was a smart businessman. When he first started the UHF television business, Channel 17, wrestling was the only show
I heard that's what
promoted
actually.
him the ratings to keep going.
Yeah.
And Ted was, grateful but also smart enough to realize, hey, so that's why wrestling was on TV.
Isn't it true he was kind of loyal to the wrestling business because that's what
He was loyal.
generated the.
He loved it. In fact, one time Ted was doing a promo in this little room in the studio where we did the voiceover leads. And I was standing off to the side, like over by the wall there, and Ted was sitting here in a chair doing something and saying something. And he was talking into the camera, and he said something about wrestling, and all of a sudden he went, oh, God! Oh, I shouldn't have said that, right? I shouldn't have said that. I mean, he was a fan, but he loved it, and he respected it. And, Ted will always be great in my book, even though he blew it to AOL.
When they had that, what was that summer '98 in the Georgia Dome when Goldberg beat Hogan, and they had all the suits there and everything, did they really think that they were going to take over? WWF was done, and WCW was going to win the war? Or
Well, no one looked at it like the WWF was done.
yeah, well, done dominating.
Oh yeah, well, it was done dominating.
Yeah.
I don't know if the suits.
Do you think that was the high point?
It was one of them because it was built up to when Goldberg pinned Hogan. For a time, again, you got to realize there was a feeling when Goldberg pinned Hogan, the feeling that night of emotion. I mean, they blew the roof off.
And that was a homegrown
It was-
WCW creation.
It was the same feeling that you got in Madison Square Garden 20 years before that, that ended.
Right.
That you couldn't get. I mean, this is why I say today, if you do it, you can still get that kind of heat and that kind of pop because people still want to believe. All you've got to do is present it in a believable way. You can still do it. Well, biggest pop I've heard since me and Bruno in the garden.
What was the most insane thing or craziest thing a fan has ever done to you? Or have you...
The craziest, most insane.
Like, you're just like, this is nuts. What is this person thinking? Or like,
well,
like how much heat did you have on you? And he,
well, heat-wise, I mean, that wasn't crazy. That was just kind of like, I mean, I was stabbed in the ass after, turning on Bruno. I had 3 cars smashed by rocks. There was a point when I went into these arenas, I had to wrestle the second or third match just so I could run out the back door. If I wrestled last, I wouldn't have made it out. Right. My cars were smashed. I couldn't drive through the hundreds of people that were crowded around because you'd run somebody over.
I guess that's showing that you're doing your job.
Oh, yeah, but it was different back then. Yeah. I mean, you get killed. I was overturned in cabs in the back of the Boston Gardens. And I mean, but those were things that were normal. They weren't crazy. You pissed the people off, they wanted to kill you. One of the stupidest things, I mean, aside from autographing boobs and butts and God knows what else, I mean, probably one of the silliest things. I'm sitting outside, some show, and I went back and took a break and had a cigarette, and some guy says hi, and I go back inside, and I'm signing autographs, and the guy's in line, and he comes up, and he's got my cigarette butt in a baggie.
I actually did that with Reggie Jackson.
Picked up off. Did you?
Yeah, I had Reggie Jackson's cigar at my house.
Well, you're just as bad. Right. So I picked your cigarette butt off the street. Will you sign this?
Right.
Sure, I will.
I was like probably 10 when I did this. It was at a baseball convention. But.
So I mean, it's.
Would you have, like, if you would have stayed in the Money Is Right, do you think, where was the program of Bruno going? Maybe eventually you guys came back together. Do you think that's one thing you would have liked to done? Where you turned back with Bruno to go against whomever?
Well, that would have been a classic ending.
Do you think there was still more money to be made with Larry Zbyszko?
Oh yeah, there was a lot. It was just a time when Bruno didn't want to do any more wrestling, and the McMahons and him. I mean, they just didn't get along. I was kind of in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And but then again, I wasn't going to do what I had to do to get along with the McMahons, which in those days was kiss butt and take roids and get huge and dance around and do everything I was really taught not to believe in. Mm-hmm. I mean, Bruno was horrified when, at first everything got over really big because of NBC, but then they make videos where the good guys and the bad guys were all in the same music video.
Right.
Bruno, and then they were horrified. It was breaking the code because we were sitting there going, "Oh God, how can you have a feud with Piper and this guy? Now they're both in the same music video." It was like wrestling was selling its soul to have a thing on MTV. Who gives a shit?
Right.
We're bigger without them.
Right.
And stuff like that. But
who do you think was the better WWF champion, Hogan or Bruno?
Oh, Bruno. What? You guys got to remember, Hogan gets a lot of the notoriety. And he's a big guy. He got breaks in the movies because he was so huge. But you got to compare something and remember this. Bruno sold out for 20 years. And when we're talking Bruno sold out, not just the Garden where there was a population everywhere he went, we're talking Bruno. When you're talking Hogan, you're talking a different era. And when you went into Garden, and when you went to the eras of the pay-per-views, it wasn't Hulk Hogan. It was Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, Jimmy Snuka, Macho Man, Ultimate Warrior, Ted DiBiase, Andre the Giant. You had 10 so-called superstars that would draw a house compared to one Bruno that would draw a house. It wasn't Hogan. It was the whole mass of them. When they did the Silver Dome, they did, 90,000 people? They gave away over 30,000 free tickets. Mm-hmm. They sold like 60,000 tickets, which wasn't much more than we did in Shea Stadium. When we had a local TV, they had national TV. They gave away 30,000 because they couldn't fill the place up. But it wasn't just Hogan. It was Hogan and Andre and Macho and Snow. They had 10 Brunos that couldn't make one Bruno.
Right.
That's how big Bruno was in those days.
I guess in closing, we want to thank you for being here today. It was a great interview.
Anything you'd like to say to your fans out there?
Well, keep watching. You never know. You never know what's going to happen in wrestling. Or the senior golf tour.
Where are you off to next, Larryland?
Going back to Larryland, and what am I doing? Golfing a bunch during the week, couple workouts, a little bit of golf, and actually, you know who a big fan is?
Who's that?
There's a pro golfer named Jim Thorpe, who's one of the best golfers in the world, but one of the best on the senior tour. Nice guy. I met him about a month ago.
Have you met Tiger at all?
No, I never met Tiger Woods, but Jim is the biggest wrestling fan. He's invited me over to his house for dinner. He's got a wall full of videotapes. He records every pay-per-view. I mean, he is into it. So I might, he wants to come to TNA when the tour is over. We're going to play some golf. So I'm looking forward to that.
Are you a licensed pilot too? Somebody was telling me?
Yeah, I'm a licensed pilot. I fly little planes in nice weather.
Right.
I used to fly for years. I meet with the Garvins.
Yeah, Jimmy flies.
Jimmy and Ronnie, and oh God, we have to read my book. But yeah, I still fly a little bit. But chicken, I'm a chicken. Little planes don't have power to mess with bad weather. So if it's nice, I'll go up.
Right.
But after years, it's like driving a car. It's kind of boring. But funny bit, Bischoff. I used to take Bischoff with me when I was flying around the AWA.
Right.
You know, I take them with, and it's weird how you're nice to people when they're nobodies, because you never know.
Right.
So, and it was then when Bischoff, got his break, I gave him my IFR tapes, and he got his pilot's license, so he's a pilot now, thanks to me.
What's he doing these days? I know he's still working for Vince. He just did the book.
I don't know. I don't know if he's working for Vince. Someone said he's plugging a book.
Yeah.
Well,
where he'll tell the truth.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, guys.